But my op-ed today and my opening rant here for the program, the op-ed over at HartmannReport.com is titled, "The Students of How to Start a Civil War Have Begun." And, you know, it starts out by talking about Sarah Clendaniel and Brandon Russell, these two people who were arrested yesterday for saying that they were going to completely destroy Baltimore. Right. Their goal was to shoot up power substations. This is what Congressman Adam Kinzinger was worried about when he told Axios last year, I don't think that's a bridge too far to recognize. It's going to be armed groups against armed groups, targeted assassination and violence. Donald Trump yesterday used his Nazi-infested social media platform to push a renewed call for violence by Americans against Americans. Senator Chris Murphy tweeted, quote, "It will likely get little attention to no attention today that the current frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination just told his supporters to start arming themselves for a civil war to overthrow the government just in case he loses." And sure enough, that's what Trump was retruthing over on his website. There actually is an active movement within the United States trying to start a civil war. They're armed, they are serious, they have shot up 9 power stations now across the United States. This was going to be the 10th. They tried to kidnap and murder the governor of Michigan. They tried to hang the vice president of the United States. They've already murdered numerous people across the country. You may not recall names like Pat Crusius and Anders Breivik or James Fields, but the members of a dozen different white supremacist groups in America can tell you the details of the lives of the El Paso murderer of 23 Hispanic people, the Norwegian killer of 77 liberals, mostly children, and the man who killed Heather Heyer and injured dozens others at the Jews Will Not Replace Us Charlottesville rally. These people think of themselves as students of how to start civil wars, and they know that you know, about 15% of Americans, many of them, in fact, probably the majority, certainly the majority of them white Americans, who were in the middle class 40 years ago when Reagan came to power, are no longer in the middle class. They know that ever since the Brown v. Board of Education decision in 1954 by the Supreme Court mandating for the first time in American history racially integrated public schools, that ever since that time there has been a freak out among white supremacists and racists in America that they can exploit. And this has, of course, also led to the movement that's very close to accomplishing its goals to destroy public education in the United States and replace it with racially segregated private schools. This is what they're all about. I mean, Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massey last year was saying, quote, the tipping point will come when, quote, 30 to 40% could agree that the American government was legitimate tyranny and needed to be thrown off. Those trying to bring down the American government need to have sufficient power without asking for extra permission. It should be right there and completely available to them in their living room in order to effect the change. So this guy calling for armed revolution against the American government, he is now on the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of Federal Government, on the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, on the Committee on the Judiciary, on the Committee on Rules, on the Committee of Transportation, on the Committee on the Judiciary. I mean, you know, Ilhan Omar, oh no, you can't have her. She's a black refugee. But Thomas Massey, no problem. Meanwhile, over at the Daily Caller, this was founded by Tucker Carlson yesterday. It leads with an op-ed, quote, "It's 2025. The United States is in chaos. Chinese super soldiers roll in from Canada and criminals rule the streets. You could use a weapon of war, but the Democrats won't allow you to have one that isn't California compliant. The media told you guns are bad and that working out is toxic masculinity. But the Chinese look pretty fit and they have guns. So do the criminals victimizing you. Alas, all that critical race theory and TikTok are useless as they break into your home and kill you." Right. This is, you know, a real thing. These people thinking that violence and the threat of violence is going to bring about political change in the United States. And it started with that 1954 Supreme Court decision and the 1980 election of Ronald Reagan and his institution of neoliberal economics, his destruction of the American middle class, his taking us from a nation that was 1/3 unionized to about 10% unionized. All of those things together have basically destroyed the main currency of government, which is trust. In 1956, almost 80% of Americans said they trust the government to generally do the right thing. Today, it's about 20%. Why? Because we've had 42 years of Republicans constantly whining and complaining and trash-talking the government of the United States. These people, hate our current government. They hate this idea of a so-called socialist government that has things like Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, housing supports, low-cost education. I mean, all of this stuff. It's just they're totally opposed to it, and this is where America is at. So what do we do about this? How do we step back from this precipice? I mean, when there's this shared sense of grievance, small things can trip off a big problem. So first, Americans have to trust that their democracy works. How do we do that? We roll back Citizens United, and we put into place an election system that is consistent across the country, like Canada has, Elections Canada, national standards for elections. Second, we have to, basically help out the people of all races who've been the victims of 42 years of Reaganomics. Other advanced countries do this by expanding union rights, expanding the social safety net, including free and low-cost medical care, free and low-cost college and trade school. I mean, when people have good jobs and income, they tend not to become terrorists. Our slogan should become, if Canada can do it, why can't America? And finally, and it pains me to say this as somebody who back in the 60s as a member of SDS was surveilled by state police and local police, but nonetheless, I think that the final step is that if we're going to avoid the possibility of a fascist takeover, as has happened in Russia, Turkey, Hungary, Egypt, and the Philippines, our state and local police and federal agencies need to start seriously ramping up their surveillance and infiltration of these domestic terror groups. America didn't ask for a homegrown right-wing terrorist movement. But now that it's here, we need to take it seriously. It's 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back. I want to share with you some thoughts on the State of the Union address tonight, Biden's economic accomplishments. Also, a whole neighborhood group of bystanders had to get together to protect a young black man armed with a cell phone from the police. Amazing story. Stick around. We'll be right back. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. It's a collection of essays. This one is by David Gilbert on page 31, titled "The System Within the System, the Prison Industrial Complex and Imperialism." For those of us held behind locked gates within the walls and fences topped with razor wire, the corrections regime is the system that works tirelessly to impose total control over every aspect of our lives. Yet as ponderous and powerful as prisons are, they're only one part, a central girder, of a much bigger and more foreboding house of horrors, which can most accurately be named imperialism. The structural needs of the larger edifice set the specifications for the size and position of the girder. The strength of the girder helps determine how long the building itself will stand. We can't understand the explosion of imprisonment in the United States since 1971 without looking at an imperialism's urgent needs and goals of that period. By the same token, we can't develop an effective program around the prison industrial complex without grappling with the stresses and trends of the larger system of imperial rule. To be clear, before you take time to read this chapter, I don't offer any brilliant ideas on strategy. Those will most likely emerge from the organizing and activist efforts themselves. However, some of the concerns discussed may raise questions that go into forming strategy. I definitely look forward to learning from the dialogues that this generates on these issues. Imperialism may sound like the kind of rhetoric we want to avoid, but it's one word that needs to be rescued as the best way to name the system that rules over us. The basis of imperialism is the relentless quest for profits around the globe. Its most striking characteristic is the colossal and grotesque polarization of wealth. That polarization happens between nations, between the rich countries of the North and the impoverished ones of the global South, the impoverished countries of Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia, and at the same time within each country based on class, race, and gender. The poles of dazzling wealth and abject poverty are intimately linked, as the former results from the ruthless plunder of the latter. This system is built on and intensifies all the major forms of oppression: patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy, all of which are structurally central. At the same time, imperialism highlights the global character of the system in a way that explains why the most intense oppression and resistance have been in the South, and that also provides the context for why the liberation struggles of the various people of color have been in the forefront within the U.S. There's no way to capture what the system costs in human life and potential, the pain and loss for all of us. Close to 1 billion human beings suffer chronic hunger, while another 2 billion face nutritional deficiencies. 1 billion lack access to clean drinking water. Just looking at children under the age of 5, imperialism is a holocaust in progress. Over 9 million die every year from easily preventable causes associated with poverty. The price for future generations may be even more severe as the rapaciousness of this global frenzy for profits threatens the very ecological basis for sustaining human life on any scale on our planet. Since most people won't accept living in squalor amid plenty, imperialism entails both the most sophisticated and the most brutal forms of social control. Its most salient feature is war, war after war after war, mainly against the peoples of the South. The domestic front line of such repression is a truly violent and harmful prison industrial complex. Today, 2,300,000 people are held behind bars, about 7 times the number in 1971. That explosion was unprecedented, coming after a 70-year period when the rates of imprisonment had remained more or less constant. This dramatic change did not result from some sudden skyrocketing of criminal activity, but rather from a radical expansion of what was designated as a crime and a draconian increase in the punishments for those crimes. Such extreme measures were driven by considerations way beyond criminal justice and often at cross purposes to the proclaimed goal of public safety. These destructive changes were born from crisis, one much more severe and protracted than the periodic ups and downs of the business cycles that occur over a roughly 10-year period, but rather a situation that threatened the very survival of the system. Such structural crises occur because capitalism is by its nature unstable. The economy is vast and complicated, but the major decisions are made by a tiny corporate and financial elite, with each thinking only of his own profits. When a structural crisis develops, the long-term institutional arrangements that assured a reliable flow of profits and the rule of capital no longer function. One dramatic example was the Great Depression of the 1930s, followed by World War II. At the end of that period, a new set of international institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, were created. At the same time, a new deal was hammered out for the terms of the bargain between capital and labor within the U.S. Those arrangements worked well for capital until they broke down a generation later. That new structural crisis, which emerged between 1968 and 73, is the seedbed for the burgeoning of the prison industrial complex and many related changes in U.S. history. The first and most obvious signs were political, as the resistance to imperialism crested in 1968. Abolition now.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Wednesday. Greetings. Welcome to our program. We will be, the first hour of our program today, which will start in just a moment. Congressman Mark Pocan will be with us for the hour. In the second hour of the program, we're going to start off with my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com. Where the hell are the next Democratic warriors ready to fight or take the fight to Trump's fascism and the GOP machine? I mean, we're hearing Democrats go, "Oh yes, we'll work with him," and just like general silence about where's Kamala Harris hiding? So we'll get to that in the second hour of the program. Also, in the third hour of the program, Heidi Siegmund Cuda is going to drop by with a list of actions we can take to thwart this organized crime ring that seems intent on taking over the United States. Geeky Science. Did you know you're ingesting a credit card's worth of plastic every week? What's that going to do to us? And also, just a heads up, tomorrow, renowned holistic veterinarian Dr. Marty Goldstein will be joining the program to take your calls and answer all your pet health and nutrition questions. Yes, we're going to take a short break from politics tomorrow. Just a short one, I promise. But on the line with us for this full first hour, and lines are open at 202-808-9925, is Congressman Mark Pocan. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. He's a current member and the chair emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He's the co-founder and co-chair of the Labor Caucus, chair of the Congressional Equality Caucus. His website is pocan.house.gov, and Rep. Mark Pocan over on Blue Sky. Congressman, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be with you all.
It is always so great to have you with us. I have two quick questions for you. The first is this new survey just came out. 40% of Americans think that Luigi Mangione assassinating the CEO of United Health was justified, essentially, was a good thing. Acceptable, actually, was the word that they used in the survey. This says something about us and our society, and I don't think it speaks to bloodlust. I think it speaks to Americans being sick after, literally sick, of being the only country in the world that doesn't have a national health care system. I'm curious your take on this.
Yeah, Tom, I actually have had this conversation with a number of folks. You can't, in my opinion, condone someone just taking on their own actions, because that's against our system of laws, and obviously there's all sorts of other problems with that. But watching the public response has clearly been one that's saying our healthcare system doesn't work. In fact, I think what it really says, Tom, is including people like myself, I have tried to navigate it, and I can barely do that. If I, as a member of Congress, can't, how can you expect the average person just trying to get by, working, dealing with their family, to navigate a system where they get bills they don't understand, they can't talk to anyone about it, they get denied for their care, they have to get sometimes prior authorization and all the rest. And it's a mess of a system. So, this is one of the things that we were truly tone deaf to in the November elections, because clearly people care about this. If you don't have health care for your family, where are you, right? It's something fundamental to the life and success of your family, and yet we didn't hear how frustrated people are, and they clearly are.
Yeah, I totally get it. The second thing I wanted to bring up before we get to our callers was what's going on within the Democratic Party? We just saw, there was all this excitement that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was going to be the new head, or at least the number two, the Democratic leader of the House Oversight Committee, one of the most powerful committees in Congress. And it looks like Nancy Pelosi pulled a behind the scenes to insert a 74-year-old guy with throat cancer instead in a position that could be a very high-profile, fighting on behalf of Democrats. Then, just to continue, Richard Neal, 75, is going to lead the Democrats on Ways and Means. Frank Pallone, 73, is the party's top representative on Energy and Commerce. 86-year-old Maxine Waters is the ranking member on Financial Services. And Rose DeLauro, 81, is going to run the Democrats on Appropriations. Connolly this cycle took $118,000 from PACs linked to the defense sector, which he'll be in a position to help out. Ways and Means is the top tax writing committee with jurisdiction over Social Security and Medicare, among other programs. Richie Neal is the top recipient of donations from the insurance industry, having received $412,000 from industry PACs just in the last 12 months. Plus generous six-figure donations from HMOs and pharmaceutical companies. Frank Pallone has gotten over $1 million from electric utilities since joining Congress in 1998. What the hell is going on inside your party?
Yeah, so you're giving a lot, and it's not all connected, and some of it is. So let me try to, in the little time we have, we have seniority as a system, and largely how we do the ranking member or the chairs of committees. I'm sorry?
Why?
It's just a system they've had, and
shouldn't it be a merit-based system? I mean, isn't that the essence of democracy?
Well, and it's also based on experience, which often is the merit in a lot of these. And most of these, like I would argue, there is no one more qualified than Rosa DeLauro to run the Appropriations Committee. So lumping them together actually does a disservice to when I think we need to say, but this Congress, we started to say, just because you've been on the planet longer isn't enough. So we did that with the Agriculture Committee. We did that with Natural Resources and another committee I'm forgetting. I think the issue, and I supported Alex because I think she'd be great, and I think she will be the ranking member and chair someday of that committee. I have no doubt that's going to happen. I think what happened here is Jerry Connolly had cancer just like Jamie Raskin had cancer when he was the ranking member on that committee, and that was used fairly effectively. That other than that, a lot of members, especially some of our identity-based caucuses, support the system of seniority because a lot of their members are currently the ranking members out of that system. So it's not as easy as seeing a wholesale change in that happening. I think what's important, especially for Alex, and like I said, I support her and I want to talk to her about this, is, she's now really in line for that committee. And given she's only been here a few years, rarely has that happened. Republican Party does things different. They term limit chairs. We don't do that. There's a lot of things you could have internal conversations about, but I don't think it was a statement against Alex as much as it was an affirmation that we still are largely seniority based unless there is a pretty serious exception, but that is starting to change.
And in other words, it was a sympathy vote, or it was just, we're recognizing the old seniority system? And
I think it would have been recognizing the hypocrisy that we elected Jamie Raskin when he was ill and was able to do the job still quite well. Right. And then you're saying someone else couldn't do that. And quite honestly, Jerry Connolly is not in some of the committees. We did have people in charge that are probably not able to do things in the same way as Rosa DeLauro, for example, who is brilliant and amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I probably shouldn't have included her in the list because she's the one that I don't have, here's where all her money came from either. But
and that's the other issue, Tom, right? That is a point, right? Like the fact that we are addicted to campaign money is affected so much of how everything runs in Washington. And that's part of what, as we have a DNC election, I'd love to see them change, especially in primaries, that outside money coming in. But I think the good news is, and I did talk to Alex just yesterday, I think she's got a great future here. She does amazing work. She's an amazing communicator. This was not as much anti-Alex as it was, how could you say, one person with cancer in charge of the same committee is okay, but not the other person?
Well, what's his name had a very curable cancer. Throat cancer is.
Yeah, but now you're asking every individual member, half of which are millionaires and not physicians, to decide which cancer is which.
Yeah,
and,
I get
Jerry
it. I get
honestly
it. It's
presents very healthy right now. I just think it's a little more complicated. It certainly is something odd to our system, and the Republicans probably do it a little bit.
Yeah, I totally get it. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. It's Middays with Mark, our regular visit with Congressman Pocan, the chair emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We'll be back with your calls for Representative Mark Pocan in just a moment. Stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan will be taking your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. And welcome back. Michael in Gainesville, Florida. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, I wanted to caution against a toxic overreaction to the school shooting because I've seen what happens here in Broward with the MSD killings and trauma. Instead of punishing and as a reaction and seeking to find guilty parties, it kind of criminalizes being a child, and there's a triple trauma that it causes children that increases shootings and increases suicides in children. And one is the direct trauma from the constant drills, which we're all aware of. The second is a complex trauma, which is just means continuous trauma from always thinking your classmates that you're always with and growing up through all 12 years are potential shooters. And this third thing is key, is it forces every child to make this false choice, and whether or not they themselves, if they're suffering trauma, and this is what happened to the 13-year-old.
Got it, Michael. So what's your question for Congressman Pocan?
What can he do to build shelves in our classrooms so that the kids treat it like a home, and they put their cherished belongings there?
Okay, Michael, thank you. Congressman, you want to speak to guns in schools?
Sure. Actually, that shooting happened in my district, Tom, this week.
Oh, geez.
So we've been, following it very closely. One thing that Michael says I think really does ring true for me is, this was a 15-year-old girl, and people are looking for reasons and manifestos. She's a 15-year-old girl, right? At the end of the day, I don't know if they're going to get what they need. But the larger problem is this is uniquely an American problem of mass shootings and shootings in schools, and yet we ignore that. And until we accept that we have an epidemic of gun violence in this country, we're not going to address it. And, in Congress, we have moments of silence and no moments of action. I've done this for 12 years for everyone else's district, and yesterday we had to do it for mine. And, my frustration really is that we just don't accept that we have this very unique problem that's killing kids and so many others in mass shootings, and no one should worry about dropping their kid off in the morning and not sure if they're going to make it out of school at the end of the day. We need to accept we have an epidemic of gun violence, and that's when we start to address this.
Congressman, we just have a little less than a minute to the break. Why don't I realize in the past you've had some Democrats who've come out strongly in favor of gun control in the United States, and many of them backed away from that position and thinking that it was an unpopular position. The evidence is now overwhelming. The majority of Americans want some kind of gun control in this country. Why don't the Democrats make this a crusade?
Yeah, we tried, right? When we had to sit it on the floor a few years back, and then nothing ever changed. Bottom line is, the gun manufacturers, which is really what the NRA is. It's not the people in my district who want to make sure they can continue a tradition of hunting with their family. No one's going after anyone's hunting rifle. But the gun manufacturers want to keep selling guns. We have more guns than people in this country. And as long as people are getting campaign cash and afraid of campaign cash used against them, you're going to see inaction in state capitals and in Congress. And that's part of the problem. People have to have the backbone to stand up to this industry that, quite honestly, is unnecessarily deadly.
So it goes back to 5 Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court saying that bribery is now legal. It's free speech.
Absolutely. A lot of things go back to that conversation
Yeah, I get it. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. One of the really great guys in Congress. We're so honored to have him both on this program and in the U.S. House of Representatives. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Representative Pocan in just a moment. Stay tuned. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com.
It starts with a whisper, it starts with a call. One voice rising can speak for us all. When we stand together, there's nothing we can't do. The strength of a union begins with you. From the factory floors to the
Welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. Just a correction, his Blue Sky handle is pocan.house.gov, at pocan.house.gov. So check that out. Do I have that right, Congressman?
I wish I could tell you the truth. Okay. I don't know.
All right, I get it. All righty. Bob in Otis, Indiana, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, good holiday season to the both of you.
Thank you.
This is on Social Security. I am an elderly individual. My entire income is Social Security. I'm getting an increase of $24 a month starting in January. I will probably be getting an increase in my rent shortly thereafter of over $40 a month. And as you know, the Republicans are already looking at bringing out the knives for Social Security. My question is, are the Democrats going to stand up in their entirety as a group and say, no way, Jose, you're not making cuts to Social Security?
Yeah, Bob, I'm just about sure that's going to be the response. Hakeem Jeffries already talks about it on a regular basis, talking about going into the next Congress. This is one of those issues that really separates us. On Inauguration Day, Tom, I'm not going to come to the inauguration. I'm going to try to highlight the groups back home, because it's going to be Martin Luther King Day that it's on, Martin King Jr. Day, that are going to be potentially affected by the Trump presidency. So we're going to meet with folks in the Latino community, especially around some of the immigration issues. We're going to meet with some of the LGBTQ plus community about some of the issues that we're seeing attacks there. We're going to deliver Meals on Wheels to talk about the vulnerable seniors on things like Social Security, like Bob is talking about. And we're going to talk about the Postal Service now that there's talk about trying to privatize that. I think, we have to be that party of FDR that looks out for the average person. That, unfortunately, I don't think that got across in November as well as it needed to be. And now is our chance to double down on that. And Social Security, Bob, is absolutely one of those core issues. If we give up on Social Security, we don't deserve to be a political party. So I'm quite sure from what I've heard Hakeem Jeffries say, I can't speak for Chuck Schumer, but I would be shocked if he had a much different position.
Alfredo in Mountain View, California, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, thank you to both, and happy holidays to both. Congressman, why can Democrats introduce a bill to simply ban fascist parties from participating in any election? And I take my answer of the air. Thanks.
Yeah, I think part of the question might be the definition of that. But I think, one of the things that we're going to have to learn to work with, Tom, in the next 2 years is we can introduce bills that are very likely never going to see the floor of the House or the Senate, because the Republicans are going to be in charge of both and the executive branch. We have to get creative. One of the things we're doing, Tom, in January, we're going to launch a podcast that we're going to do out of my office to talk about many of the issues you and I talk about with callers, but, spend 45 minutes talking about Medicare Advantage, right, and what the issues are, and talk with experts like Alex Lawson and others that are out there about different issues.
Very cool.
So, I think we all need to do that, find our alternative ways to get messaging out. We found that, of the undecided voters in the last election, 45% didn't get it from traditional TV news, and we all have got to figure out ways to be more effective. Introducing bills may not be the path. It may be using other forms of communication, getting the best experts out there introduced to people, and then let's figure out how to organize around those issues.
Yeah, or you could use the bills as the news hook, essentially, to hang stories on and guests and things. That's great. Charlie in St. Louis, Missouri, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I realize that this ship has sailed, but I wanted to get your take on why you think, given the GOP and Trump's propensity for cheating, I want to get your take on why there wasn't at least some recounts in the swing states. And, Tom even had Mr. Spoonamore on talking about bullet ballots, and we know that they threw a whole lot of voters off the rolls for no good reason. And it just seemed like, they wrote, Kamala conceded the very next day. It just pains me that we rolled over so quickly without at least some recounts.
Yeah, Charlie, my best guess is that there weren't high-profile examples of real problems. I can speak best to Wisconsin. We just didn't see them, and if you didn't see them, it's harder to make the case to do a recount. At least in some cases, you have to be within a certain margin to get it automatically. And there were fewer of those than we've seen in some past elections. But I don't really have a definitive answer.
Congressman, if Democrats in blue states, Washington, Oregon, Wisconsin, had purged 4, 5, 6 million people off the voting rolls in the year prior to the election, how do you think the Republicans would respond?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, the reaction should have been stronger in those states. I would never put Wisconsin with the group you put, right, because we're not a blue state.
No, my point is, if Democrats did this, Republicans would raise hell. Republicans do this, and Democrats don't say a word.
Yeah, well, I've seen some, but I agree. I mean, I think in the states where this happened, I did see things talked about at the time. I guess my question was, Washington State and Wisconsin couldn't be more different.
Well, no, it's like 5 million votes were purged in Florida, Texas, and Georgia. I mean, it's like anyway.
No, and that's part of it is having an aggressive Democratic Party, right? Part of why Ben Wickler, our state party chair in Wisconsin, is someone that many of us are supporting.
We need Ben. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Exactly.
Congressman, hang on just a second.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Sorry, I'm feeling feisty today. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. Middays with Mark, with one of the finest members of Congress. We'll be right back with your calls for Congressman Pocan. Doctrine of Discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from Chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice I said to the people, "You cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human." Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. "You are not welcome here," he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
injustice and truth buried deep in the ground, sold to the highest bidder without a sound. Elections they claim to be fair and free, but look close enough, it's a billionaire spree. Who needs democracy when billionaires call the shots? They're rewriting the rules, taking all we've got. Dark money's pouring, drowning out the light. They're owning the stage in America's fight.
Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour. Middays with Mark here on our program. And Larry in Los Angeles. You're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Hi. We have four people who held the position of Fed chair who are still alive today. And during the time when they were running the Fed, the Democratic presidents have gotten the worst of the policies. Carter saw the highest hike in the Fed rate. Joe Biden saw the next highest, Bill Clinton, and then the 8 years of Kennedy Johnson. That's how they ranked in with high rate hikes. All those presidents cut the Federal Reserve, cut the deficit, and they got rewarded by higher Fed rate. And recently, all of the Republicans get trillions of dollars in quantitative easing, which I consider to be fascism. They get that. Joe Biden has just seen roughly $500 billion removed from his years when he was in the presidency. In other words, if I were to have as bad of a record in my finances, I would get high interest rates, and no one would give me a loan. The Republicans get the exact opposite. And these Fed chairmen need to answer the question, why is that happening for 71 years?
Congressman?
Didn't hear the question in there, but I think just in general on the Fed, I think, a lot of us have advocated they lower interest rates a lot quicker than they did, and maybe that autonomy should be a question because certainly I do think it helped to cost Joe Biden and Democrats going into the election cycle when their goal is a certain level of unemployment is when you've hit the right ratio as opposed to what should be a standard that we actually use. So I think there are certainly problems, and I agree with the caller on that.
David in Huntley, Illinois. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi. First of all, thanks for taking my call. With all that's going on with the appointments and nominations and all that, the Post Office General, Louis DeJoy, seems to kind of fallen in the shadows. Is there going to be any nominations to the people that will be able to oust him?
Yeah, David, so this is going to be one I think we're going to have some conversations about once Trump becomes president, because he's now talking about privatizing the Postal Service, which would be absolutely awful. The goal is to deliver mail and to service American people, doing that, not to make a profit or any of these other things that are out there. He put Louis DeJoy in place, and then we should have got rid of him, even though it's the Postal Board of Governors that deals with it. Honestly, I now regretfully, Tom, think that this is a mistake by the Joe Biden administration, that they didn't do more to get rid of him more aggressively with their appointments. Yes, the Senate hasn't confirmed some of the Postal Board of Governor folks, but Donald Trump's already saying he's going to fire him because Democrats and Republicans think DeJoy is terrible. The problem is Donald Trump's answer is to privatize, which is an even worse answer than just dealing with DeJoy. So we're going to really have to do a lot, I think, to make sure that we're saying the right things about the Postal Service. The good news is, Tom, is it's one of the most organic issues that I get, and I'm guessing every member of Congress. People support the Postal Service. They appreciate the service they get, and we just have to make sure we defend it so that we have a free Postal Service, not something that's privatized in the Trump administration.
Amen. Holly in Washington, D.C., you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, good afternoon or morning, gentlemen. Thanks for being there today. I'm a pretty busy, savvy woman and planned my retirement, which started a little early because of COVID. But, I ran out my numbers for 25 years and said, I can swing this. I got to cut back, etc. And I'm saying that in preference to the question, which is, I asked you before the election if MAGA won all three houses, what would be the mechanism for them to either eliminate it or minimize payments? And since that nightmare has came true, I'm wondering if you have an update, just for my planning purposes. This is not a gotcha question.
Yeah, no, I get you. I think, this Doge Commission is going to be what is used to recommend a whole bunch of bad ideas. The good news is the Doge Commission is about as effective as Elon Musk is, right? He has no power, and that commission will have no power other than it may give Republicans ideas for bills and things. The margin's going to be so tight in the House because of the appointments from the Republican caucus. They only have one vote to spare, one person who leaves them, and they can't do something for the first 3 or 4 months. And after that, it's the tightest margin in Congress since 1931. We have 215 seats. You need 218 to have the majority. I think, especially on Social Security, it's going to be very hard to do changes. Not that they're not going to try. And as you know, Donald Trump tries to threaten everyone who doesn't do what he wants to. We just have to make this a public pressure campaign. The good news is the public agrees with us. I mean, Social Security and Medicare are two of the most popular programs the federal government offers. So we just have to be ready to speak out and to be organized and look to groups like Social Security Works and others that are working on this issue. And but I think the Doge Commission, to direct answer your question, is probably where they're going to be proposing some really dumb things. And then at that point, we need to be ready to stand up and fight them.
Bill in Sierra Blanca, Texas. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Congressman Tom. Yes, I have a question about LNG. I live in far west Texas, where a massive LNG export facility pipelines proposed to go to Mexico for 3 billion cubic feet a day of gas to China, only China. And I was wondering, Congressman, your thoughts about how this is going to play out, because President Trump, our future 47th President Trump, is saying he's going to put tariffs on China. I'm reading that there's uncertainty that all these LNG exports throughout Texas and Louisiana that they're proposing more and more of that actually the Chinese president, if Trump actually slaps a 60% tariff on China's imports, it could lead to Chinese retaliation by China avoiding LNG purchases from the U.S. I would just like your thoughts on that, because this doesn't benefit anybody in the United States. And also, last thing, and I'll get off, the Energy Department just released their study about that it's from the pause that President Biden had on all LNG exports to non-free trade countries. And it's damning, except they're not recommending denying any more exports. What are your thoughts, Congressman?
Yeah, Bill, let me answer it a little bit higher rather than specifically to this issue, because I think it's going to affect a lot of things. Don't forget, Donald Trump is full of hypocrisy and double talk, right? I think we're going to have to remember when he was president 4 years ago, remember 95% of what he said he didn't do. He's kind of a open, every idea in his head comes out and he doesn't execute them all. But the problem is we got to figure out which are the ones he's going to try to do and make sure that, we're defending anyone who might be attacked or stopping bad ideas along the way. In this case, with the tariff issue, this is one of the dumber ideas that he's put out there. Tariffs actually are very valuable in certain cases. Targeted tariffs on the steel industry, for example, when they're going to dump cheap steel in the United States, was able to protect an industry and a lot of jobs, and that was important. Across the board, tariffs is just stupid, right? It's Donald Trump trying to appeal to whatever, but I doubt he's even going to be able to execute it. So we just don't know, I guess, is the answer, Bill, other than, we're going to have to see what he really does with tariffs. But don't forget, 95% of what he does, he doesn't do. The problem is the 5% he does is going to be our fights that we really have to make sure we're protecting people on. But I just don't know how he's going to execute what he said. I think it's going to be more of the bluster from Donald Trump.
Michael in Bronx, New York. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Congressman. First off, happy holidays to you.
Thank you.
And secondly, All right, we all know that whenever an injustice is done to a police officer, you know how pretty much all police officers in the city, throughout the state, or even nationwide are always standing in support of one another, showing each other solidarity, and making a clear, bold statement that they're not going to tolerate such injustice. With that said, you know, with Trump threatening all his critics, and I even take into personal threat towards me since I'm a critic, you know, you have police officers that are critics. You had the judiciary that are critics that he's threatened. You have former presidents, one of whom is 100 years old now, all right? They have other people.
So, Michael, your question.
Other professions. So my question is, why can't people, even in Congress, have a discussion on this to say, you know, we got to stand together and encourage others to stand together, send a bold message to Trump? We're not going to tolerate this. You have no right to be you have no right to be threatening us because we're speaking the truth.
Let's get the answer. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, I hear you. I think, you know, we are, in fact, I mean, especially a lot of us in the Progressive Caucus are really worried about those constituencies that he is already making threats to, and we've got to make sure that we're having extra forms of communication with them to make sure we're defending people's rights. We can't let Donald Trump take away anything and do things that are un-American, because I think many of his ideas are directly un-American. The problem is in the Republican Party, the critics are so very few because they're afraid of primaries from Donald Trump. I think what's going to be interesting is watching Elon Musk. At some point, Tom, the Elon Musk explosion with Donald Trump is going to be absolutely popcorn worthy, because it's going to happen. I mean, watching right now, he's trying to stop the CR bill that the Republicans need to get through Congress, or else we shut down the government. Like, he just doesn't have any experience in government, and then, you know, his ego and Donald Trump's ego, and throw in a few more. It's going to be epic. So I think the problem is the Republicans just don't stand up right now to Donald Trump, and that's at your question.
There you go. And now he's threatening Liz Cheney again.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour. Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Chair Emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus in just a moment. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Pocan.house.gov is his website, and Rep. Mark Pocan over on Blue Sky and pretty much other social media. We'll be right back. And welcome back, Ron in Seattle. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman. I hate to revisit the election, but what is it going to take for the Democratic Party to do a mea culpa and admit that they cannot separate themselves from the older, stultified policies, some of the Biden administration? I hear Hakeem Jeffries being interviewed and asked this question, and he continually dodges it.
The gerontocracy, sir.
Yeah, so Ron, I don't know if your question is actually the accurate question. I know what you're trying to say. I don't think people were necessarily, pointing all to Biden policies, because Harris came in and tried to somewhat differentiate, although that infamous interview probably, ended many of her chances when she couldn't differentiate herself from Joe Biden. But Joe Biden actually, on economic populism, might have been the most populist Democrat we've had in quite a while. And I think that's why people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and myself and others were very supportive of many of his policies economically. They were good, but what we didn't do enough was really let the public know that despite this global inflation that was out there, we, one, did things to try to curtail those costs, but two, that, we talked about things like the minimum wage, making sure that goes up, talking about things like healthcare. Look at, again, everything out of the assassination that happened. People are very, very upset. We didn't talk enough about those core economic issues. So I don't think it had so much about people defending Biden's policies, because I don't know many people who are out there actually even talking about Joe Biden right now a whole lot. I think it's more, where are we as a party? And I think we need to get back to those FDR roots that absolutely unequivocally show working people who's working on their behalf. And if we do that, we'll be successful again. But we have to really do it and mean it.
Adam in Renton, Washington, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. We have a minute and 15 seconds to the break. Got a quick one?
Very good. Thank you. Perfect timing. Good morning, gentlemen. My question to Congressman Pocan is actually a follow-up to what you were just talking about, in that if the Democratic Party is serious about representing the working class, then would it be possible for it to be a condition of signing up as a member of the Democratic Party in Congress to pledge that you will not take any campaign donations above whatever amount, maybe $250 per donation, similar to what Bernie Sanders does? And then, and only then, I think the working class people will believe that you, as a party, are working on their behalf. What do you think?
And Congressman, isn't that sort of like saying, we hate Hitler, we hate the fact that he's using guns against us, so we're going to lay down our guns?
Yeah, I don't know if that answer, Adam, is as much as proving it by what we say and what we actually do. And that means supporting the minimum wage, making sure that everyone has access to health care, only industrialized nation that doesn't have universal health care, protecting and enhancing Social Security. Those are issues that are winners, and we need to get past them.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls 51 minutes past the hour. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov, pocan.house.gov, also his Twitter handle and Blue Sky handle. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Representative Pocan. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So back when Donald Trump debated Kamala Harris, he was asked about world leaders and whatnot, and he went off on this thing praising a guy named Viktor Orban and saying he's a tough guy, he's smart, he's the prime minister of Hungary, and he loves me, basically. So who is Viktor Orban? Well, it turns out Viktor Orban is a guy who took over Hungary in a regular election, the prime minister, and then turned it into basically a neo-fascist paradise for right-wingers. All the media is now controlled by right-wing oligarchs. He's packed the courts. He's changed the Constitution so that they have things like gerrymandering and voter suppression, so he always wins every election. He throws people in jail for criticizing him, even on Facebook. I mean, this is what Hungary has become. Fox News loves it. Tucker Carlson did his show from there for a week, and that's what Donald Trump wants to do to America. You can read the whole thing over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Trump's New Hero, the strongman who crushed democracy in Hungary. Check it out. Welcome back. 52 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. Linda in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. You're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Thank you for taking my call. Love you, Tom. I have a question. My husband passed away in July 2nd of this year, and I've done everything, and Social Security has been good. I got that all straightened out. But the death benefit, I cannot get it. They've told me it's been approved. I've asked who can I talk to. Why can't I get it? It's $255. I could use it. And no one can answer the question. They said it just takes time. It's all been approved. but they just haven't released it. Have you come up against that, or what can I do to follow up on that? Thank you.
Sure. Linda, first of all, sorry for your loss. And, absolutely, this is something that is worth calling your member of Congress or your U.S. Senator, because we do have what I refer to as the bat phone for those people who are my age. Remember the Batman show where you get a special line right to a federal agency, and we can often help break log jams. So that's one of the strongest reasons you should reach out to your elected representative, whether it's something like you're talking about, problems with passports, problem with veterans benefits. We really are there to help, and we really do help constituents literally every week, Tom, in this area. So, Linda, please contact your member of Congress or senator and let us try to help.
Nancy in Woodland, California, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, do the Democrats have plans for what to do if Trump declares himself a dictator on day one, as he says he's going to? I mean, he doesn't joke. He's not a joker. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're ready for a lot of scenarios. I don't think he's going to call himself a dictator on day one. I think he's going to be a little more clever, but we are waiting for what are those very first actions he's going to do, including likely pardoning the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, sending a pretty chilling message we think that's out there. Look, I think we're going to have to be ready for legal challenges, and there's groups and attorney generals and governors that can do that. We're going to need that in place. We have to work with all of our partners that are going to work with various endangered constituencies that Donald Trump has threatened. But as I said before, don't forget 95% of what Donald Trump says he never does. He's a lot of bluster, but it's figuring out what that 5% is. And then we have to all be ready to be activated. And don't forget, it may not be you who's attacked by his first action, and maybe not his second, but it might be the third or the fourth. And if no one's there for you because you weren't there for people on those first attacks, then you're not going to have the support you need either. So we all have to take anything he does as an attack to our democracy, our country, and defend whoever is targeted by his actions.
Just a little over a minute to the break, to the end of the hour. George in Santee, California. You got a quick question for Congressman Pocan, please?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Tom. What's going to happen with the Palestinians? What's the end game there? Every day, more and more innocent women and children are dying over there. It needs to stop. And I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah, George, you're ending on a very pessimistic note. I don't think we're going to have a lot good happening. I haven't been happy with much of how, honestly, the Biden administration's dealt with this. I'm certainly not thinking that Donald Trump's going to be much better. I just had UNRWA in my office today, and honestly, there's a new law that basically is going to eliminate their ability to provide education and food that they've been doing. It's pretty bad, pretty dire, and in 55 seconds, it's hard to give you a good answer other than we all should care and we all need to do more. And especially UNRWA, they're not going to have U.S. financial support. That's significant. UNRWA USA does provide that. They raise about $50 million that helps go largely to people in Gaza and the West Bank. And please keep them in your thoughts this time of year.
UNRWA is the UN agency, right?
Yeah, but it's also a 501c3, UNRWA USA, that helps provide support.
Cool. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. We so appreciate you coming on this program every other week and doing these. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and thanks to your listeners. Happy holidays to all of you.
Back at you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Thank you. We'll be back on the other side of this break. What the hell is going on where are the Democratic warriors? We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Age of Illusions, How America Squandered Its Cold War Victory by Andrew Bacevich. This is from the introduction. Without the Cold War, what's the point of being an American? Henry Rabbit Angstrom, novelist John Updike's late 20th century everyman, posed that question just as the long twilight struggle was winding down. More than a quarter of a century later, Rabbit's plaintive query still awaits a definitive answer. Indeed, the passage of time has only sown confusion about whether there is a point to being an American. Even as the Cold War was ending, Updike's surrogate was not alone in feeling it a loss. By the 1980s, the Cold War had become more than a mere situation or circumstance. It was a state of mind. As had Rabbit, most Americans had come to take its existence for granted. Like the polar ice cap or baseball's status as the national pastime, it had acquired an appearance of permanence, so its passing caught Rabbit's fellow citizens unawares. Those charged with managing the Cold War were, if anything, even more surprised. The enterprise to which they had devoted their professional lives had suddenly vanished. Here was a contingency that the sprawling U.S. national security apparatus, itself a product of the anti-communist crusade, had failed to anticipate. At one level, of course, the surprise could not have been more gratifying. In the epic competition against pitting West against East, the God-fearing against the godless, and democracy against totalitarianism, our side had won. All-out nuclear war had been averted. The cause of freedom, which Americans felt certain they themselves embodied, had prevailed. Victory was decisive, sweeping, and unequivocal. In another sense, however, the passing of the Cold War could not have been more disorienting. In 1987, a senior advisor to Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev had warned, "We are going to do a terrible thing to you. We are going to deprive you of an enemy." As the Soviet Union passed out of existence, Americans were left not just without that enemy, but without even a framework for understanding the world and their place in it. However imperfectly, the Cold War had, for several decades, offered a semblance of order and coherence. The collapse of communism shattered that framework. Where there had been purposefulness and predictability, now there was neither. Winning the Cold War brought Americans face to face with a predicament comparable to that confronting the lucky fellow who wins the Mega Millions lottery. Hidden within an apparent windfall is the potential for monumental disaster. Putting that windfall to good use while avoiding the pitfalls inherent in suddenly acquiring riches calls for prudence and self-awareness. Not easily demonstrated when the big house, luxury car, and vacation condo you've always wanted are yours for the asking. Similarly, the end of the Cold War might have given Americans pause, especially since the issues at hand were of considerably greater significance than homes, cars, and condos. At least in theory, the moment might have invited reflection on some first-order questions. What is the meaning of freedom? What does freedom allow? What obligations does it impose? Whom or what does it exclude? Of course, Americans had been wrestling with such questions since well before 1776, their answers evolving over time. During the several decades of the Cold War, however, the exigencies of the East-West rivalry had offered a reason to throttle down impulses to explore America's furthermost boundaries, or freedom's furthermost boundaries. Except on the fringes of American politics, most citizens accepted the word from Washington that their way of life was under grave threat. In the pecking order of national priorities, addressing that threat, defending freedom rather than enlarging it, tended to take precedence over other considerations. This is not to suggest that Cold War Americans were a complicated lot. They were not. From the 1950s, misleadingly enshrined as a decade of conformity, through the Reagan-dominated 1980s, domestic crises and controversies were constants. Among the issues energizing or enraging Americans were civil liberties, the nuclear arms race, mismanaged wars of dubious provenance, challenges to artistic tradition, left-wing and right-wing radicalism, crass materialism that coexisted with widespread poverty, and a host of simmering issues connected to race, sex, and gender. Yet through it all, an uncommon outlook centered on resistance to the red threat endured. For most citizens, most of the time, the Cold War itself was sufficient to explain the point of being an American. The collapse of the Soviet Empire between 1989 and 1991 robbed that outlook of its last vestiges of authority. Rarely, if ever, had the transition from one historical period to another occurred quite so abruptly, with such a precise set of demarcations, and with such profound implications. As if in an instant, the discipline that the Cold War had imposed vanished. The absurdity of defining reality as an either-or choice, red or dead, slave or free, good versus evil, now became blazingly apparent. The impact on American ambitions and expectations was akin to removing the governor from an internal combustion engine. Suddenly the throttle opened up. The future appeared equally promising, offering Americans a seemingly endless array of choices, while confronting them with few evident constraints. Everything seemed possible. Confident that an era of unprecedented U.S. economic, military, and cultural ascendancy now beckoned, members of an intoxicated elite threw caution to the winds. The book The Age of Illusion by Andrew Bacevich.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. So my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is titled, "Where the hell are the Democratic warriors ready to take the fight to Trump's fascism and the GOP machine?" Yeah, where are they? Now, Monday morning, on this program, I was complaining about the fact that CNN and MSNBC had both spent 40 minutes carrying a live press conference by Donald Trump in which he lied through his teeth, talked about privatizing the post office, mused about ending school children's vaccines for polio, threatened an Iowa newspaper pollster. I mean, you know, it's just a typical Trump BS fest. And I went into this rant about, you know, where is Joe Biden? Well, it turns out I was uninformed, apparently. Joe Biden, at that same time, was giving a speech at the inauguration of the Francis Perkins National Monument to FDR's Labor Secretary Francis Perkins up in Maine. And he truthfully pointed out that in his one 4-year term, he created 16 million jobs, which is more than all the jobs created by Bush Sr., Bush Jr., and Trump combined. That's 16 years of Republicans created fewer jobs than Joe Biden did in 4 years. None of the media carried it. Trump's press conference, we're still talking about 3 days later. Biden's press conference, not a word. So I get it. There's a media bias against Democrats generally, or you could argue for Trump. I mean, we saw this with, you know, Les Moonves, the head of CBS News, saying, you know, it's making us money. Keep it up, Donald. But that doesn't mean that elected Democrats need to run and hide. I mean, Americans across the country are terrified, particularly in red states where women are bleeding out while the morbidly rich and the religious fanatics are licking their chops. So where the hell are the Democrats? What happened to when we fight, we win? I mean, even when the media would rather ignore you, even when even when the media is against you, political theater still works. Standing up to bullies still works. Fighting back becomes even more imperative. Where the hell, for example, is Kamala Harris? She told us Trump was a fascist. She said he was a threat to the country. She said he was going to destroy she said, quote, Donald Trump has said he would terminate the Constitution of the United States. That sounds like a 5-alarm fire. So where has she been since the election? Did Trump's fascism just go away? His threat to terminate the Constitution was just a joke? Where the hell is she? For that matter, where the hell are the leaders in the Democratic Party? It seems like Nancy Pelosi's been spending her time trying to keep Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from getting leadership of the Oversight Committee, handing it off instead to a 74-year-old congressman with throat cancer. I mean, really? The headline over at KamalaHarris.com right now says, "Our fight continues," all capital letters. And below that it says, "Please donate to hold the Trump administration accountable." Really? How's she going to do that from wherever she and Tim Walz are hiding? Please tell me. Is it that Trump has succeeded in cowing the Democrats as fast as he has our largest corporations, their billionaire owners, and Joe and Mika? I mean, a few Democratic members of Congress have even said, "We look forward to working with Trump and his muskrat buddy." Is this some kind of sick joke? Remember the night of President Obama's first inauguration? At the same time Louise and I were dancing with Barack and Michelle at Union Station, Republican leaders were gathered at the Caucus Room restaurant in Washington, D.C. to organize a massive resistance campaign against America's first black president. It was the entire leadership of the GOP. Eric Cantor, Jeb Hensarling, Pete Hoekstra, Dan Lundgren, Kevin McCarthy, Paul Ryan, Pete Sessions, Senators Tom Coburn, Bob Corker, Jim DeMint, John Ensign, John Kyle, Newt Gingrich, and Frank Luntz, who organized the meeting. I wrote an article about it back in the day for Truthout. This is what I wrote. Over juicy steaks and fancy cocktails in a private room in the back of the restaurant, the Republican bigwigs promised each other that they would filibuster and obstruct any and all legislation supported by President Obama. Congressman Pete Sessions, who was at the 4-hour-long dinner, even promised to use Taliban-like tactics to achieve these goals. Kevin McCarthy said that he would obstruct every single piece of legislation, including things Republicans used to support. The caucus room conspiracy had 3 major objectives. Number 1, use obstruction, knowing that the corporate media would call it gridlock and blame both parties to prevent Obama from having any legislative success. Number 2, sabotage any legislative victories that the president did have, like Obamacare, and convince U.S. citizens they were actually failures. And number 3, to blame all the economic damage caused by this Republican sabotage on both parties, and then come out and say, "We're going to fix it if you just elect us." Kevin McCarthy came out of the meeting and told a reporter, he said, "If you act like you're in the minority, you're going to stay in the minority. We've got to challenge them on every single bill and challenge them on every single campaign." And sure enough, they did. They continue to do so to this day. And the voters, by the way, rewarded them by shellacking President Obama and his Democrats in the 2014 election. Remember? Excuse me, in the 2010 election. Where are the Democrats today with that kind of spine? Where is our resolve to fight rather than enable fascists? What happened to our principles, our commitment to democracy? 24-year-old Parkland survivor and gun activist David Hogg, one of the Democratic Party's up-and-coming stars, I would say, pointed out that the Democratic Party has become far too reliant on self-interested consultants. He said, quote, "Throughout the campaign, there were multiple times that I brought up publicly my concern about young voters, and I was shut down by consultants and messaged by them saying, 'You don't know what you're talking about. This is not an issue. This is dumb of you to say,' and a whole lot of other things I can't tell you on TV." He said, "We need to build a party that tells people what it needs to hear, not what its consultants are paid to say." There were a few brave governors who stepped up and spoke out. J.B. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom, Lujan Grisham, and a few others who said, "No, we're going to fight Trump's mass deportations." And then the party went silent. Now, this isn't how Democrats used to do this. LBJ ate the Republicans' lunch. He destroyed them legislatively. Franklin Roosevelt, he called them and the people who backed them economic royalists. He said, these economic royalists complain that we seek to overthrow the institutions of America. What they really complain about is that we seek to take away their power. And our allegiance to American institutions requires the overthrow of this kind of power. Philadelphia, 1936. Republicans called FDR a tyrant and a communist, and he laughed at them. They said he'd destroy America. He steamrolled them. They whined and complained as he called out their fat cats and ridiculed that generation's Republican Party. He rendered them impotent. When one wealthy man famously said he'd have to leave the country because of FDR's 90% income tax, FDR said, well, I will miss him very much. To laughter. You've all heard the clip on this program. He named names. He was arrogant. He fought hard on behalf of the average person until literally the day he died. Where is this generation's FDR? Where are the Democratic Party's heroes? Where are our spokespeople? Where is their outrage? Or do Democrats expect Trump to just magically morph into Mitt Romney on January 20th? 5-alarm fire is over? Fire is out? Disaster averted? What the hell? Kamala Harris lost the election. She lost by a whisker, but she lost. But if she and other leaders and would-be leaders of the Democratic Party don't stand up now to challenge Trump and this fascist crew that he's assembling, don't offer a contrasting vision for the future of our country today, if they don't challenge Trump's outrageous policies and bizarre appointees every single day, they're going to lose our democracy as well. Democrats, it's time to grow a damn spine. 15 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with you. Trump is already lying. He's already walking back his promises. Why don't the newspapers have headlines that simply say, oh, Trump lied about this? I'll share that with you on the other side of the break, and I'll pick up your calls. Stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the True People's Media, the Thom Hartmann Program. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back. Bobby in Baltimore, Maryland. Hey, Bobby, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for letting me call in. I wanted to piggyback. I originally called in when Mark Pocan was on the line, and you already touched on it. Where are the Democratic leaders coming out against fascism? And I think you have to look right to the point of this recent oversight chairmanship position. We have a Democratic Party establishment that is literally getting in the way of progressive leaders championing progressive ideals and taking on the Trump administration and the fascism they represent. So I think we have to look right at this older generation of establishment Democrats. They are responsible for this election loss, for not having a real strong approach in combating fascism. And I don't know why people like Mark Pocan, I wish I had been able to ask him, why are they so timid? Why is the Progressive Caucus so timid in naming out people like Nancy Pelosi who are getting in the way of progressive champions carrying this party forward? I think they need to take the gloves off. AOC has played nice in the sandbox. She's proven herself, and it's gotten her nowhere. So now it's time to take the gloves off. Well,
it's actually gotten her some pretty good successes. But I agree with your point, Bobby, and I think Nancy Pelosi has some splaining to do. And, as I shared with, Congressman Pocan, we have, let's see, Richie Neal is 75 years old. He's running Ways and Means. Ways and Means is the tax writing committee. Richie Neal and oversees the insurance industry. Neil just got $412,000 from the insurance industry just this year. I mean, you know, and even more, six-figure donations from HMOs and pharmaceutical companies. Frank Pallone, 73. He's the head of Energy and Commerce. He's gotten over $1 million from electric utilities. I mean, this is just wrong. This is just friggin' wrong. Bobby, thank you. Susan in Caldwell, Idaho. Hey, Susan, what's up?
Well, you can answer my question. It was actually for Mr. Pocan. You know, this Social Security Fairness Act that might get a vote in the Senate but passed overwhelmingly in the House, that would pay government retirees who took the government jobs that did, in many cases, did not withdraw Social Security taxes by design because they had their own pension situations, to pay them money now when they did. I've seen both sides of this argument, overwhelmingly comments from the union members, nothing bad about union, but I see where their self-interest is here, you know, to get this money back. And they all say, well, this all started with Reagan. I remember way before Reagan looking at Social Security as a kid, and it was very clear. If you go into a public pension-type job, like a teaching was the big one, they will not take Social Security taxes out of your paycheck. Therefore, you will not get that Social Security benefit. Fair's fair. You got a government guaranteed pension. So I don't get this thing with the Fairness Act that's supposedly going to blow another hole in the Social Security finances with no plan to fix that.
It's not going to be that big a hole. It's not going to be that big a hole. They're just you know, compared to the whole size of Social Security. And a lot of these people, you know, their pensions just aren't what they used to be. I get it. You know, like I said, like you said, Susan, I can argue both sides of that one. I think the bigger issue is let's get rid of the damn cap on Social Security, and that legislation does not do that, sadly. And that's really what we need to be doing. Susan, thank you for the call. 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Trump's on the screen with his circus lies. 40 minutes of fear, 40 minutes televised. He's ranting, he's raving like it's all for show, while Biden's out there, but nobody knows. 60 million jobs in 4 short years, built with truth, not chaos or fear. But the cameras don't care, they're chasing the flame. Where are the Democrats to win this game? Where are the Democrats? Why don't they fight? Trump screaming fascism in broad daylight. The fire's still burning, but no one's there. Where are the leaders who used to care? Where's the FDRs, the LBJs calling out the green, showing us the way? If democracy's dying, we can't sit back. So where are the the Democrats? Kamala said it's a 5-alarm fire. Trump wants the Constitution thrown in the pyre. But where's her voice? Where's the rallying cry? You don't win a war just standing by. Republicans plot like they did back then. A caucus room deal, sabotage again. They're building their empire brick by brick. And silence from the left just makes me sick. Where are the Democrats?
Welcome back. 23 minutes past the hour. So Donald Trump is now walking back his campaign promises. Of course. Congressman Pocan said, Trump basically, 95% of what he said he was going to do, he didn't do. That's kind of a rhetorical phrase. The actual number, PolitiFact actually broke down the numbers. And he kept 23% of his promises, and he fully broke 53% of them in his last term as president. And now he's, remember he was going to scrap Obamacare? Remember he was going to have an infrastructure bill? Remember he was going to have a balanced budget? He had none of those things, of course not. And what's so funny is he ran on a slogan of promises made, promises kept. Remember that? Big signs at the RNC when the Republican promises made. No, he lies said, lies continuing, basically. So anyhow, in 2024, this year, he said he was going to end the Ukraine-Russia war in 24 hours after he was elected. Well, it's been what? 3 weeks, 4 weeks? I don't know. I don't have a calendar, but 5 weeks. And the war is still going on. He says he was going to deport 11 million immigrants. I'm skeptical. We'll see. He said that his tariffs won't raise costs for consumers. Right now, this was NPR did a whole story on this morning. Right now, companies that import things from China, Japan, Taiwan, you name it, mostly from Asia, but companies that import goods are doubling up on those goods right now and raising their prices, which is causing the Fed to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't cut interest rates any further, because they're expecting Trump's tariffs. So when he was asked about that on television, he said, you said that your tariffs won't raise costs for anybody. And he said, can you guarantee that? And he said, I can't guarantee anything. Right. Then he said, when he was running for president, he said, I'm going to lower grocery prices. He said this over and over and over again. I mean, he on Truth Social. Prices are too high. The consumer's angry at this incompetent administration. Kamala has no idea to bring prices down. She's afraid to even discuss it with the fake news media, even worse than her VP candidate. She doesn't even have a clue. I will do it. It will happen fast. So Time Magazine's Eric Cordolesa asks Trump, you said you were going to lower grocery prices. Are you going to? Trump's response, and I quote, it's hard to bring things down once they're up. It's very hard. Oh, poor Donald. He desperately tried to distance himself from Project 2025. Remember that? He says, you read some of the things in Project 2025, they're extreme, they're seriously extreme. I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it. Right. And now the head of, the main architect of Project 2025, Russell Vought, is going to run his Office of Management and Budget. Paul Atkins, who was an author of Project 2025, he's going to run the Securities and Exchange Commission. Brendan Carr, who was an author of Project 2025, he's going to run the Federal Communications Commission. Tom Homan, who's going to be his border czar, helped write Project 2025. John Ratcliffe, who helped write Project 2020, he's going to head up the CIA. And the list goes on. Why won't the headlines simply say Trump lied? Hey, Republicans, you are suckered. Why can't our media simply tell the truth? Republican voters were suckered in 2016. More than half of the time, Trump outright broke his promises. He didn't even keep a quarter of them. And this time, he's already breaking his promises. Republicans, are you feeling like suckers yet?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Give me a shout, Trump voters. I'd love to hear from you. It's 27 minutes past the hour. I'll pick up your calls after this. today is Midnight in Chernobyl, the untold story of the world's greatest nuclear disaster by Adam Higginbotham. This is from the prologue. Saturday, April 26, 1986, 4:16 p.m., Chernobyl Atomic Energy Station, Ukraine. Senior Lieutenant Alexander Logachev loved radiation the way other men love their wives. Tall and good-looking, 26 years old, with close-cropped dark hair and ice-blue eyes, Logachev had joined the Soviet Army when he was still a boy. They had trained him well. The instructors from the military academy outside Moscow taught him with lethal poisons and unshielded radiation. He traveled to the testing grounds of Semipalatinsk in Kazakhstan and to the desolate East Urals trace, where the fallout from a clandestine radioactive accident still poisoned the landscape. Eventually, Logachev's training took him even to the remote and forbidden islands of Novaya Zemlya, high in the Arctic Circle, and ground zero for the detonation of the terrible Tsar Bomba, the largest thermonuclear device in history. Now, as the lead radiation reconnaissance officer of the 427th Red Banner Mechanized Regiment of the Kiev District Civil Defense Force, Logachev knew how to protect himself and his three-man crew from nerve agents, biological weapons, gamma rays, and hot particles, by doing their work just as the textbooks dictated, by trusting his dosimetry equipment, and, when necessary, reaching for the nuclear, bacterial, and chemical warfare medical kits stored in the cockpit of their armored car. But he also believed that the best protection was psychological. These men who allowed themselves to fear radiation were most at risk. But those who came to love and appreciate its spectral presence, to understand its caprices, could endure even the most intense gamma bombardment and emerge as healthy as before. As he sped through the suburbs of Kiev that morning at the head of a column of more than 30 vehicles summoned to an emergency at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, Logachev had every reason to feel confident. The spring air blowing through the hatches of his armored scout car carried the smell of the trees and the freshly cut grass. His men, gathered on the parade ground just the night before for their monthly inspection, were drilled and ready. At his feet, a battery of radiological detection instruments, including a newly installed electronic device twice as sensitive as the old model, murmured softly, revealing nothing unusual in the atmosphere around them. But as they finally approached the plant later that morning, it became clear that something extraordinary had happened. The alarm on the radiation dosimeter first sounded as they passed the concrete signpost marking the perimeter of the power station grounds, and the lieutenant gave orders to stop the vehicle and log their findings. 51 roentgens per hour. If they waited here just 60 minutes, they would all absorb the maximum dose of radiation permitted Soviet troops during wartime. They drove on, following the line of high-voltage transmission towers that marched toward the horizon in the direction of the power plant. Their readings climbed still further before falling again. Then, as the armored car rumbled along the concrete bank of the station's cooling canal, the outline of the fourth unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant finally became visible, and Logachev and his crew gazed at it in silence. The roof of the 20-story building had been torn open, its other upper levels blackened and collapsed into heaps of rubble. They could see shattered panels of ferroconcrete, tumbled blocks of graphite, and here and there the glittering metal casings of fuel assemblies from the core of a nuclear reactor. A cloud of steam drifted from the wreckage into the sunlit sky. Yet they had orders to conduct a full reconnaissance of the plant. Their armored car crawled counterclockwise around the complex at 10 kilometers an hour. Sergeant Vlaskin called out the radiation readings from the new instruments, and Logachev scribbled them down on a map, hand-drawn on a sheet of parchment paper in ballpoint pen and colored marker. 1 roentgen per hour, then 2, then 3. They turned left and the figures began to rise quickly. 10, 30, 50, 100. 250 roentgens an hour, the sergeant shouted, his eyes widening. Comrade Lieutenant, he began, and pointed at the radiometer. Logachev looked down at the digital readout and felt his scalp prickle with terror. 2,080 roentgens an hour, an impossible number. Logachev struggled to remain calm and remember the textbook, to conquer his fear. But his training failed him, and the lieutenant heard himself screaming in panic at the driver, petrified that the vehicle would stall. Why are you going this way, you son of a bee? Are you out of your effing mind? If this thing dies, we'll all be corpses in 15 minutes. Part 1, Chapter 1, The Soviet Prometheus. At the slow beat of approaching rotor blades, black birds rose into the sky, scattering over the frozen meadows and the pearly knots of creeks and ponds lacing the Pripyat River basin. Far below, standing knee-deep in snow, his breath lingering in heavy clouds, Viktor Brukhanov awaited the arrival of the nomenklatura from Moscow. When the helicopter touched down, the delegation of ministers and Communist Party officials trudged together over the icy field. The savage cold gnawed at their heavy woolen coats and nipped beneath their tall fur hats. The head of the Ministry of Energy and Electrification of the USSR and senior party bosses from the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine joined Brukhanov at the spot where their audacious new project was to begin. Just 34 years old, clever and ambitious, a dedicated party man, Brukhanov had come to western Ukraine with orders to begin building what would become the greatest nuclear power station on Earth. Midnight at Chernobyl. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com.
You're a mean one, Mr. Trump. You govern with disdain. You stacked the court with chaos and left us all in pain, Mr. Trump.
Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Well, first of all, the rant at the top of the hour was fantastic, and I really do wish the Democrats would get up off their rear ends and do something.
Amen.
But the reason I called, the post office is the only federal agency in the Constitution. To get rid of the post office is going to require a constitutional amendment unless Trump just decides to throw the entire Constitution in the trash.
I don't think that's true, Norma.
It's in the Constitution. Are you just going to go ahead and sell a federal agency without even looking at the Constitution?
The reference to it is in Article 1, Section, 7 or 8, where it lists all the things that Congress can appropriate money for, and one of them is postal roads. Congress can appropriate money for roads, where they've done that. But the post office
and the whole
is not.
The whole point was to ensure rural delivery of mail to provide communication.
I get it. But and we all know that if they privatize the post office, what's going to happen is that low-income areas, particularly inner-city areas and rural areas where it is not as easy to serve. Those people are going to, and it's not as profitable to service them, are going to lose out to high-rise apartment buildings and suburbs that are easy to serve. And it's all going to be run for profit. I get that. It's a terrible thing, but I don't think the constitutional argument is going to save it. I think it's going to be Democrats standing up and saying, hell no.
Yeah. Well, has anybody even brought up the fact that you would have to have an account with one of these companies to get your mail delivered? And what about the people who use the post office for money orders? And where will we get our passports from? The post office serves the United States, and it has been decimated by this guy that's running it, who's a Trump supporter.
Agreed.
And this should be a scandal on TV, and
Agreed.
it's not. Instead, they're saying, we're going to fix it by selling it and privatizing it.
Yep.
Well, instead, they should fix it by making it efficient and keep it a federal agency.
It used to be a federal agency. It is no longer. The post office is no longer a federal agency. It is now a private corporation. It's one of a very small handful of corporations that were chartered at the federal level. Most corporations are typically chartered in the states. 99.99999% of all corporations are chartered in states. But
that should
Amtrak,
never have happened.
I agree. Amtrak and the Postal Service, and this happened, I believe, during the Reagan administration. I remember when it happened, and my recollection is it was Reagan. It might have been Bush Sr. But the whole pitch was, we're going to make it more efficient, just like we're going to do with Amtrak, by spinning it off as a private-public partnership. It's going to be a separate corporation. Congress will continue to fund it, but, well, actually, in the new law, that passed says that Congress can no longer fund the post office. It has to be self-sustaining. It has to be self-funding, and that's why they have to raise postal rates, But that was the beginning of the process. That was the camel's nose under the tent, and all the Republicans at the time were like, oh, no, we're not trying to privatize the post office. We're just trying to improve it. But this was the setup for privatization, because right now, Norma, they can privatize it without having to violate the Constitution. They can do it with a simple piece of legislation.
Well, I also have been sitting here, Tom, wondering what is wrong with the Democrats that they have not passed a law that a person convicted of felon should not be able to be elected to any kind of public office. Right. Why haven't we passed a law that a felon should not be able to be elected to a public office?
Yeah, Trump can't own a gun. He can't vote in Florida. So why? Oh, geez.
Yeah. So tell me something. If he does on the first day stand up and declare himself a dictator, what will the Democrats do? Will anybody even protest?
Well, if we're looking at today's Democrats right now, the way the party is responding, I think they'll probably all say, well, let's go have a retreat in Costa Rica and then just stay there for 2 years. I don't know. Norma, thank you. I share your outrage. Thank you. Nikki in Chicago. Hey, Nikki, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I, too, am outraged by the post office, and I just don't understand why we can't improve on what's going on and get rid of the joy, and I don't understand all of that. But anyway, going forward, when we talk about what happened with the CEO and everyone complains, I understand that. It is definitely
You're talking the United
not
Healthcare
acceptable
CEO?
to kill someone.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay, but that was an extreme movement. We have to remember what John Lewis said about good trouble, because that's what it's going to take to fight the Republicans going forward. We're not going to be able to just sit here and depend on the judicial system and everything else to do what it should do. We as Democrats are going to have to physically do something, whether it be sitting at the lunch counter or sitting on the bus. It's something like that. Maybe the obstetricians all need to go on strike in order to fix Roe v. Wade. I mean, just something's going to have to be dramatic to change this course.
I absolutely agree. And in fact, I thank you for that good trouble. I just edited that into my article for today, because I
couldn't think of it.
That's a great question. That's the Democrats need to grow a spine. I mean, it's just that, and I've been sadly I've been saying that for a lot of years. I used to say that. I used to make jokes about Harry Reid. I used to make jokes about how Harry Reid needed to go stand outside Arnold Schwarzenegger's governor's mansion and snatch his testosterone when it came, which I realize is kind of a sexist joke, but it reflected my thinking at the time, which was that Harry Reid needed to grow a spine. And testosterone aside, I still feel that way. And this latest thing of Nancy Pelosi just sabotaging AOC it just has me just horrified. So, but let's not. Go ahead.
I am so proud of AOC.
Me too.
I don't believe that you can have an entire Democratic Party of AOC or Bernie Sanders. I think there has to be pieces that come up with these little pearls, and they get sent into the mainstream, and the mainstream needs to massage those pearls to make them bipartisan or somehow palatable for the other side, and that's how we accomplish things.
Yeah,
I think those thinkers are the ones who are really going to make the changes.
Yeah,
maybe not having a whole party of them, but you certainly need that. And even the MAGA, there should always be a couple of MAGAs out there in their Republican Party. That's fine. The problem is we've got an entire party of MAGA.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I used to essentially ridicule the great man theory of history. I forget who came up with the theory. But there was this idea that history is written by leaders who step forward, and I used to think, no, it's the leaders come about because the times demanded. Like FDR. Had it not been for the Great Depression, FDR would not have been able to do what he did. But increasingly, it is becoming obvious to me that there actually are some people who are just incredibly talented politically. And AOC is one of those people, and they do change history, for the better or for the worse. Hitler was one of those people too, and Donald Trump is one of those people. It's sad to admit, but it's true. And so, where are the stars in the Democratic Party? I think we know where they are, and we also see that the gerontocracy, the 70 and 80-year-olds in the party are doing their best to keep a lid on those young people. I want to see Maxwell Frost. I want to see more of Jasmine Crockett. I want to see more of I want to see David Hogg, get into Congress. Anyhow, I'm ranting here now. Nikki, thank you for the call. I agree. Thank you. You said it so well. Jerry in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind today?
Yes, Paul. I'm sorry, Tom. I was hoping to talk to the congressman, but I can ask you the question too. Of course, we found out in this election that Florida is definitely a red state. No question about it.
Well, maybe. If you push a couple million people off the voting rolls, and you intimidate black voters by throwing a bunch of them in prison, then yeah, you got a red state. But I don't think the majority of Florida voters love Ron DeSantis, frankly. I could be wrong, but but you live there. I don't. So Jerry, I'll respect your opinion, and I'm not going to argue with you.
Well, there's going to be there's two groups that now voted against their own self-interest. The seniors, not this senior, but many of the seniors voted against their own self-interest. But what I have heard really turned Florida for Trump was South Florida. I heard that there was a 118,000 vote difference between him and Kamala Harris, and a lot of it came from the Hispanics down there who thought that this deportation thing was going to be the other Hispanics, not them.
That's right. These are the Cuban Americans who are like, yeah, get rid of the Mexican Americans. We don't like them. I totally understand.
Now, here's my question. Have you found out, or in your conversations with Congressman Pocan or other members of Congress, exactly how this is going to work? How I understand that South Florida is going to be ground zero for the beginning of this. How are they going to tell the, quote, bad ones from the good ones?
Right. What I'm hearing, Jerry, and this is kind of leaking out around the edges, but what we're hearing is that, number one, the Trump people are quietly talking to some of the right-wing militia folks to get some independent help, shall we say. Number two, they're talking to sheriffs, particularly members of Sheriff Mack's organization or organizations like that, these so-called constitutional sheriffs, these right-wing, hardcore right-wing sheriffs who think that they're like the senior, officers in their states or counties. And of course, he's talking about employing the National Guard in each one of the states. And I obviously, he's going to start with the red states. I think you're right. Probably Florida, Texas are going to be the first two, and that they will be his testing ground. And if he has success there, he's going to try and roll it out nationally. But really, right now, nobody knows. Jerry, thank you for the call. 46 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It was Thomas Carlyle who came up with the great man theory of history. We'll be right back. And just FYI, Sean tells me that the post office was spun off as a separate federally chartered corporation during the Nixon administration. Amazing. I didn't realize it was that far back, but I do vividly remember the debate. I really do. Anyhow, what's on your mind? Lamar in Pasadena, California. Hey, Lamar, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
Great. I was trying to catch up. Mr. Pocan, but I guess I was a little too late
You're
for that.
You're stuck with me, Lamar. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's not a big drop off there, I don't think. But anyway, since my topic was going to be about Jack Smith being appointed by Biden, I talked to you about that a couple of weeks ago. But let me go to Pelosi and AOC. Since they have this gerontology thing going with the Democratic Party, maybe AOC, Maxwell Frost, David Hogg, and some of the squad can kind of put together their own coalition, try not to ruffle too many feathers, but try to keep the Democratic Party together, but still advance an agenda that's going to, retard this fascism revolution or whatever it is that's going on. You have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's the big challenge, Lamar, and this has to be weighing heavily on AOC and people associated with her. The big challenge is the fact that 5 Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court legalized political bribery. They said, it's just fine if you want to bribe a politician. It's now called free speech instead of bribery, and the consequence of that is that. For example, we had 2 members of the squad who were taken down, by AIPAC, by the American Israel Political Action Committee, which is obscene. We had a member of wannabe member of Congress here, Sheila Jayapal, Pramila Jayapal's sister, who works in government here in Oregon. She was running for the U.S. House of Representatives, and she had said that we need to stop weapons sales to Israel, and so AIPAC came in here with millions of dollars and just carpet bombed the area. So as long as political bribery continues to be legal in the United States, and by the way, we're the only advanced democracy in the world where this is legal. As long as that continues to be the case, we're going to have a really serious problem. And all of these politicians who want to actually create change, all of the genuinely progressive politicians, the AOCs and the Cori Bushes and the Maxwell Frosts and you name it, they're all, hanging by a thread that can be cut or lit on fire by people like AIPAC or by, Elon Musk coming in like he's doing right now to Joni Ernst. He's running ads in Iowa because Joni Ernst wasn't sufficiently enthusiastic for Pete Hegseth. And so he's running ads in Iowa that are suggesting that maybe she should have a primary challenger because she's up for re-election in 2 years. And suddenly she's going, oh, wait, I'm not, I didn't mean that. Please, let me kiss your butt, Mr. Trump, Mr. Hegseth, please come by. Yes, nothing wrong with sexual assault in the military, et cetera. I mean, this is the cancer at the heart of our democracy, is that you had 5 well-bribed Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court who said, hey, bribing judges like us, not illegal. That's called free speech. Bribing politicians, of course, have to fall in the same category, so politicians can get bribed too. And Clarence Thomas walks away with millions of dollars in gifts, his mother's new house, his son's new college, or his new education, and the billionaires are just licking their chops. Lamar, thank you for the call. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
At the North Pole, there's a man with a list, checking it twice, seeing who he'll assist. Santa's been listening, the word's getting clear. He tunes to Thom Hartmann this time every year. Does Santa Claus listen to the Thom Hartmann Show? He's learning about democracy and all we should know.
51 minutes past the hour. Patrick in Seattle. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hey, good morning. First of all, happy holidays. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Thank you, back at you, Patrick.
And thanks. I'm 70 years old, Tom, and I'm probably going to keep voting for Democrats for the rest of my life. But why would one young person or one independent voter do the same thing? you've been great. You've been talking about the Democrats' disappearance, but also there's this rigged insider quality of everything they do that just is making me crazy. And at some level, to an uninformed voter, this must look just like the Republicans.
Yep.
Chuck Schumer's in the Senate Democrats. He's got one job really, and that's to deliver Democratic votes. And he's been thwarted from day one until last week by Manchin and Sinema. Chuck Schumer's a failure.
Yep.
And everybody's talking about Democratic messaging failure, but elderly Nancy Pelosi has just thwarted the most effective messenger the Democrats have in favor of Jerry Connolly. And there's like a dark metaphor there, scuttling this brilliant young speaker for an old man with throat cancer. I took your advice, Thom Hartmann, and the day after the election, I tried to reach out to my local Democratic Party. There's no way to contact them in person. Just an invitation to a freaking Zoom call in January. That's it. What do we do?
It's a place to start, Patrick. It's a place to start. And if you can get on the inside and you can get a few friends on the inside, you can change things. I mean, that's the work we've got. I don't see an alternative. I really don't. We're not going to be able to start a third party. The Democratic Party is $1 billion corporation. That's the bad news, I guess, or that's the good news, too, because the door is wide open in most cases. I realize there are some places where the Democratic Party is so heavily run like an old boys club that it's really hard to break in. It's really hard to get anything done. I hear those stories from people who call from around the country, particularly in some rural areas, for example. But generally speaking, if enough good people get inside the party, they can change it. And that's another op-ed that I need to write is, become a precinct committee person. It's important. Patrick, thank you. I share your concerns. Claudia in Newport, Oregon. Hey, Claudia, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi. I share his concerns, too, and it almost seems like the Democratic Party has been infiltrated for many years.
Well, I think when the Supreme Court changed the rules of the game, Democrats really had to play by those new rules or they wouldn't have had any power at all.
Right, the money game. I get it, yes. You're right, but and thank you for the conversation today. It's a very good show. I'm talking about today Trump's magic diversions. Is kind of what Pocan calls his bluster. Okay, his diversions, and I'm thinking what maybe people aren't thinking about. Hello.
Yeah, I'm listening.
I'm thinking that maybe everything that's obvious, right? That everybody wants Social Security, the polio vaccine. Everybody wants that stuff. It's so obvious. I'm thinking that's a diversion, and that Trump is okay. He's going to let the Congress, his idiot Congress, pass certain things, and then at the end he'll be our savior. He'll save us from everything and veto it and say, I care about you, lovely citizens.
Yeah. We'll see. I fully expect that we're going to see a repeat of what we saw during his last administration, which is every day he's going to go out and he's going to lie to the cameras, and a large percentage of Americans are going to believe his lies. And the media is not going to challenge them.
I don't think it's going to be the same. I think that people like Bannon and a lot of, Putin, give me a break, Russian psyops, it's very, well, I don't have a word for it, but
it's effective is what it is. It's effective. Claudia, thank you very much. Aaron in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Hey, Aaron, what's on your mind? We have just a minute, by the way.
A lot now. I'll try to maintain my focus. I'll start my comments at the end. On the 4th of July, 2026, it won't be a celebration of the 250th birthday of America. It will be a requiem of America. Now, I'm with you. Now I'll go back to when you were talking about Mitch McConnell and, everything he said about Barack Obama. And when he told Barack Obama to his face that you will never see a Supreme Court justice and then we'll do everything to impede you, that was sedition. That's in the Constitution. That should have been the end of that.
Yeah, I don't think that was sedition. I think that was politics, Aaron.
No, it was sedition because sedition is it's an organization that acknowledges the the overthrow or the impediment of a duly elected government. You can.
I understand your argument. I absolutely understand your argument. And morally, I 100% agree with you. Legally, though, it's just politics. And Democrats need to learn how to play hardball politics, too. Aaron, thank you for the call. We'll be back on the other side of this break with Heidi Cuda. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Fred Kaplan's new book, The Bomb: Presidents, Generals, and the Secret History of Nuclear War. This is from the introduction. For 30 years after the Cold War ended, almost no one thought, much less worried, about nuclear war. Now almost everyone is fearful. But the fear takes the form of a vaguely paralyzed anxiety. Because of the long reprieve from the bomb's shadow, few people know how to grasp its dimensions. They've forgotten, if they ever knew. The holiday from history began on August 8th, 2017, when President Donald Trump, barely 6 months in office, told reporters at his golf resort in Bedminster, New Jersey, that if the North Koreans kept threatening the United States with harsh rhetoric and missile tests, quote, they will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen, end quote. Even those who didn't remember President Harry Truman's similar description 72 years earlier of the atomic bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, Truman said, a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. It was clear that in language more bellicose than any president since the end of World War II, Trump was talking about launching nuclear weapons at North Korea. Not if its leader, Kim Jong-un, first attacked the United States, but merely if he developed the ability to do so. Then, 6 months later, Trump signed and released his administration's Nuclear Posture Review, a 74-page document that called for building new types of nuclear weapons and integrating them with the military's conventional war plans. In short, for treating nuclear weapons as normal. The red lights flashed. The alarm bells rang furiously. Yet here is what few recognized. None of these notions were new. The president himself seemed a departure from the norm. His character, erratic, eruptive, thin-skinned, willfully uninformed, a combustive mix for a world leader with his finger on the button. But the button and everything around it were the same. In those decades when most of us chose to forget the bomb, as global tensions calmed and fallout shelters crumbled and we turned our gaze to other problems and pleasures, the nuclear war machine continued to rumble forth in the beyond top-secret chambers of the Pentagon, the Strategic Command Headquarters in Omaha, the weapons labs in various parts of the country, and the think tanks whose denizens never stopped thinking about the unthinkable. They all kept at their singular task, wrestling with the dilemmas posed by the bomb's existence. How to deter nuclear war? How to fight a nuclear war if it cannot be deterred? How to win it if such a thing is even possible? This is the nature of the nuclear era, and the era never drifted into suspension, even if our attention did. Trump snapped us out of our slumber, reminded those of us who were old enough to know, and informed those who weren't that the bomb is still here. In public over the years, officers and officials have described America's nuclear policy as a second strike deterrence. If an enemy strikes us with nuclear weapons, we will retaliate in kind. This retaliatory power is what deters the enemy from attacking us. In reality, though, American policy has always been to strike first preemptively, or in response to a conventional invasion of Allied territory, or to a biological or large-scale cyber attack. In any case, not just as an answer to nuclear attack. All of these options envision firing nuclear weapons at military targets for military ends. They envision the bomb as a weapon of war writ large. This vision has been enshrined in the American military's doctrines, drills, and exercises from the onset of the nuclear era through all its phases. Most presidents have been skeptical of this vision, morally, strategically, practically, but none of them have rejected it. Some have threatened to launch nuclear weapons first as a way of settling a crisis. The few who considered adopting a no first use policy, in the end, decided against it. There are rationales for these doctrines, drills, and exercises, and for the retention of the first use option. They are driven by policies, personalities, and bureaucratic rivalries, but also by a logic which, once its premises are accepted, hurls its adherents and the rest of us into a rabbit hole of increasingly bizarre scenarios that seem increasingly, if strangely, rational the deeper they're probed. Understanding the nuclear era, the era of our lifetime, means understanding the rabbit hole, who dug it, and how we got stuck inside. It means tracing the maze of its tunnels, which is to say the arc of its history. A story enmeshed in secrecy, some of it still secret, much of it now illuminated by declassified documents and interviews with key actors, though never fully told. How did we get to this second coming of nuclear panic? How did we wind up with thousands of nuclear weapons, far more than any war aims could justify? What propelled the nuclear arms race during the decades-long Cold War? And what happened to the weapons and their guardians after the Cold War ended? And how and why did any of this persist? Chapter 1, Killing a Nation. The book Fred Kaplan's The Bomb.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. On the line with us is the author and Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter Heidi Siegmund Cuda, co-host of the Radicalized Truth Survives podcast. You can subscribe to her Substack at bettedangerous.com, B-E-T-T-E, dangerous.com. And she's also Heidi Cuda, H-E-I-D-I-C-U-D-A at Blue Sky. And Heidi, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom. Super happy to be here.
It is always an honor and a pleasure to have you with us. So the last time you were on, we were going to talk, and then I changed the subject at the last minute, my apologies, about some of your suggestions for how America can basically harden itself against the oncoming onslaught of Trump and Musk's fascism, the Muskrats' fascism. Shall I do your bullet points and go through, and you you can explain, or you want to just go off on a rant? I leave it to you.
You know what? We can start with the rant, and if I get derailed, we'll go back to the bullet points.
Okay,
but honestly, Tom, I was just looking at your most recent post, and I think you sum it up in just about 7 words. It's time to grow a spine. I left out the expletive. It's time to. We need to grow a spine. Democrats need to grow a spine. Where are they? As you know, I believe that President Biden's first duty to the United States of America is to defend America. And we have seen some baby steps, but I do think it might be time to start throwing punches. I also want to point out to your viewers and listeners, and I'm sure they're quite aware of this, America is not unique. There are nearly 24 other countries that have been enduring these hybrid warfare attacks from Russia. And if we just called it warfare, we would actually have to do something about it. But I think it's very important that we look around the world and we look at Georgia and Romania and Moldova and Belarus and, Ukraine, and we see that there is a world war going on. It looks different from previous wars because we call it hybrid, information war, active measures, whatever, but it is affecting the outcomes of elections. We were attacked in 2016. There was an attack on the Capitol in 2021, and in 2024, minds were twisted away from reality through various social media platforms. That was intentionally to sway the outcome of the current election. And of course, I'm happy to give you my 4-point plan on where I think we need to be pressuring Biden. But I just wanted to start with that. We're not unique. That's the whole thing. So the first thing, what I would like to see in the perfect world, if we could take some immediate action, I think President Biden, with all the powers that he now has, should say the United States supports the immediate admission of Ukraine to NATO. That would be a nice stick in the eye to Putin, in my opinion, and it would also bring to bear unlimited resources. But other countries have done it. Again, this is not peacetime. We're in war. If we just acknowledge the information war, as other countries have done, we could actually do things like that. My other suggestion is to lift all the restrictions on the weapons. It's up to Ukraine to defend itself. Just do it. Biden can do these things right now. This has always been about Ukraine. This has always been about the invasion of Ukraine. And I have geopolitical analyst friends that believe World War III actually started in February of 2014. My third thing and my favorite, Tom, is declare the Russian state a terrorist state. Declare the Russian Federation a terrorist state. Right now, Putin's banking on Russia to surrender Ukraine to him. And if Biden declared Russia a terrorist state, that would help so many of these smaller countries. Georgia right now, 21st day of protests because a Russian-backed government is not what they know. That these countries that have faced this for many years, they know what Russian interference looks like. They want to be part of the EU, and this is very reminiscent of what happened in Ukraine a decade ago. My last thing that I think is very, very important, and of course I have a million others, release the list. There are 600 U.S.-based propagandists, 600 names that I think Americans should get to see. They're politicians, they're members of our military, think tank analysts, academics, businessmen, reporters. Release that list so we can see who is doing
Who compiled this list?
So basically what we know is in the 277-page affidavit where we learned about the doppelganger operation, right? We learned that Russia was doing all these duplicate websites to make it look like sites on the West, not just in America to twist American minds, but in Germany and other countries. They were doing this operation where they would mimic a
hang on just
website.
a second. Whose affidavit was this? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, that's all right. So do you remember that whole flurry in September of the Department of Justice, the FBI, the U.S. Treasury, releasing all this information about Russia's information warfare attacks on America? So there was tenant media. There were we learned about the influencers that were paid millions of dollars. Okay, so there was also, I'm a docu-nerd, so I like reading all the, releases and footnotes and affidavits. So the FBI gave us a very detailed 277-page affidavit It's called the Doppelganger Affidavit. And what it basically reveals was why they seized 32 websites that were made to look like American websites, so made to mimic something like the Washington Post or made to mimic something like CNN. And what they really were was part of an operation that was directly related and responding to the Putin regime to do 80% regular news, but 20% pro-Russian propaganda. And what we learned in that affidavit is that there are 600, and this was translated from Russia. It was incredible because they had granular detail on what was actually happening in real time in Russia, again, to target the minds of the West. And in America, there are 600 U.S. propagandists that this operation was keeping an eye on, and they were from a variety of backgrounds, but their job is to do pro-Russian, anti-Ukraine, anti-Western narrative warfare, targeting our minds. And I'll just give you one example. If you look at the feed for Tenet Media, which was the Tennessee-based company that was known to be taking $10 million from RT. We know that RT is linked to Russian military intelligence. Frozen in time, the day that the Department of Justice indicted this media company, you can still see the feed on Twitter. And you can look, it was, I think, September 4th where they froze it, where they were indicted, this company. And you just watch it, you just look at it. It is all the anti-Harris stuff. It is all the, designed to target people, to, be worried about trans people. It's all this narrative warfare wrapped up as patriotism, wrapped up to look like it's America, but it's actually a Russian operation. And again, we have this lack of imagination. Our country and the minds of our citizens have been assaulted for a decade, and the response to it, again, has been very, very weak. And I was excited in September when there was this flurry of activity. I thought, finally, Americans are going to get to know how much they've been hit. And instead, we don't even have the names of the people who are doing this work on U.S. soil.
Decision?
Merrick Garland, interestingly, when the Department of Justice indicted 2 Russians as part of this operation, they did not indict the influencers here in the U.S. I don't understand why you would go after
probably because we have the free speech laws, would be my guess.
Well, that's what's so interesting. During the same period in early September, the U.S. State Department came out with a statement that gives us great utility that finally says covert influence activities are not journalism. So these foreign-backed covert influence activities are not journalism.
Heidi, you can stay with us, right?
Sure.
Okay, hang on just a minute. We've got to hit a break here. Heidi Cuda is with us. Check out her website, bettydangerous.com, BETTE, dangerous.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back with with Heidi. Stay tuned. So you were saying, as we were so rudely interrupted.
Oh, I was basically saying, yeah, sure, why not? Why not pin this on Merrick Garland? Why not pin this on Chris Wray? That little bit of gaslighting they did, congratulating each other. We have slow-walked justice in this country to this current, what I call the organized crime ring decapitation strike on America. It didn't have to go this way. There was a lag time in indicting Trump for his myriad crimes.
Yeah,
and
2 years.
Again, Tom, how is it okay that Elon Musk buys Twitter with Saudi money, Russian money, and clearly uses it to detonate information warfare and to use it as a radicalization engine to influence the outcome of the 2024 election? And that's just okay.
Yeah.
You know,
How much was, I knew that there was Saudi money in his purchase of Twitter. I didn't realize that there was Russian money.
Yes, there are. There was a few sons of oligarchs. There's multiple reports on this. You know, you can trace it back. And again, America is not unique. Moldova just came out with a report showing a Russian oligarch paid money that actually went to 84,000 Moldovans to try to detonate information warfare and influence Moldova's elections. And I know we talked about Romania on the show the last time, how they nullified their presidential elections for this very thing. But, you know, 22 countries throughout the world are facing these types of attacks. And again, you're right, America maybe was paralyzed. Like, what do we do? Well, we knew to shut down RT, so we got rid of Russian state TV because we knew that was a propaganda outlet. But where can you find that? You can find it easily on the Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance financed platform Rumble. 24 million people are watching it streaming live every day, and that's just one of them. And again, because we have such I don't know why we lost our way on addressing treason in America. But again, I talked to you the last time I was here. In the 30s and 40s, we didn't have that problem.
Yeah.
If you were committing treasonous acts trying to overthrow the American government on our soil, you got stripped of your citizenship. Everything was seized, and you were deported.
Sort of. I don't know if you've listened to Rachel Maddow's podcast or read her book, but there was an enormous amount there was a whole bunch of members of Congress who were literally being paid by Hitler, who were supporting Joe McCarthy, and McCarthy was being supported by Hitler. I mean, it was just wild stuff going. Or actually, the McCarthy came later, but in the 40s, there were all these guys. But anyhow, keep going.
No, it's just always been a mixed bag. But at least we can look back to say, okay, did they actually strip the head of the German American Bund of his citizenship? Yes. Did he do jail time? Yes. Was he incarcerated? Yes. And one of the great things I just learned from Nancy McLean, who had done a book 30 years ago about Behind the Mask of Chivalry. She's amazing, right?
She is.
She basically, I've learned so much from her. But she basically said that these movements, and she's referring to the KKK, but she applies them to more modern times, these movements mask themselves as all kinds of things. But what really happens when it's peeled back and people find out that it's just criminals criming, they then lose members, and then these movements collapse from their own overstep and their own corruption.
And we need to be doing that. Heidi Cuda is with us. You can stick around a little bit longer?
Of course.
Okay, Heidi Cuda is with us, the author and Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter, co-host of the Radicalized Truth Survives podcast, and BettyDangerous.com. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
I'm dreaming of a bright Christmas.
And welcome back. Heidi Siegmund Cuda is with us for the hour, or for the half hour, excuse me, taking your calls. Or not. Geez, I'm running on autopilot from Marty Pocan here. I am so sorry. Heidi, let's get back to your list of things that Joe Biden and friends, Merrick Garland et al. Could be doing right now to protect our democracy? We have about 5 minutes left here.
Well, so you heard my top four, and now I'd like to say one of the things we can start doing is we can stop using propaganda language because it's getting us nowhere, and we're in narrative warfare. And an example of that, Timothy Snyder tweeted out last week, stop saying anti-vax. Stop saying, stop using these weak words. And Timothy Snyder said, don't call them anti-vaxxers, call them kid killers. Like, let's start kind of getting down in the mud and doing this right, because we have been using weak words like meddling and sowing. And if we called what was happening war, we would actually have to do something about it. And that is why I wanted to start off with the top four list. The other thing is we all can start protesting in this moment while Joe Biden is still president. I don't understand the muted response. In 2016, women rose up, and we had, this really strong response to something that we knew wasn't quite right. How could this possibly be? And here we are, and I'm sure part of it is the fear, but we have to push through that. We have a very short period of time and a short window. All we have to do is just look at Georgia and realize that people have been out there for 21 days. Go back a decade, look at the revolution of dignity. These people said, we're not going to have this. Yes, in Ukraine. And again, we've talked about this multiple times on the show. Same players. Paul Manafort installing, an avatar, a proxy for Putin in Ukraine. Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager in 2016, doing it again in America. We are not unique. This has been a global effort to push away, liberal democracy, all the things that actually did make our country great. We can always improve. We've never been perfect, but we can improve and push us toward authoritarianism that nobody is going to like. And, I think that they're telling us, Trump's regime is telling us exactly what they're going to do. And I just want to tell you, I'm looking at my incoming notifications. I have a friend named David Wheeler. He's part of a group called American Muckrake, and he just filed today a lawsuit against Donald Trump because he said he has so much emotional distress. His home was hit in the hurricane. He's out getting passports for his children. He is a progressive who's now looking into arming up because he's afraid of what's coming, and he's actually taking a stand for Americans saying, this is not right, this is not normal, and I just wanted to give a shout out to him because there is a man who grew a spine. Yeah. He said, I do not accept a fascist America. So he is actually, today he filed a complaint in North Carolina against the incoming Trump administration because he is, he is like millions of Americans scared, but not so scared that he's not trying to do something about it.
That's important. That's really important. So, have you gone through all your steps here? It seems to me like there was...
No, there's probably a million more things.
Well, we have another 2 minutes.
I do think it's incredibly important that we do declare the information war and stop hiding from that. And again, let's just go through a couple of things here. The French authorities arrested the CEO of Telegram. Do you remember that?
I do.
Charging him for officiating crimes on his platform. So let's get a little bit more imaginative. Brazilian police formally charged Bolsonaro and 36 of his backers for not only being involved in a coup, but of a potential assassination plot of the current president. Again, I'm sure you are hearing echoes of 2021 when Trump did not care what was going to happen to his then vice president. And I keep saying this, Georgia's in its 21st day of protest demanding the resignation of a government that's steering the country away from the EU. They want their pro-Russian government ousted. The problem that I'm seeing as I look around at all of these, explosive events happening throughout the world, most of the people who are doing the work of Russia are just kind of biding their time for a few weeks till Trump gives them everything they want and surrenders America to this authoritarianism. My family came from Germany to live the American dream. My parents left a fascist-ravaged country to live the American dream. People like me and you, I'm sure, now have to look around the world and go, where do we go? You know, Americans need to remember why their democracy is something that is worth standing up for, and we need to acknowledge that immediately and put pressure on the Biden administration. And to quote my friend Thom Hartmann, Democrats, please grow a spine.
Yeah. Okay. We are in the break here. We missed that. So Heidi, thank you so much for being with us today. Great talking to you.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay. BettyDangerous.com. We were the envy of the world. And then Republicans came along and they said, well, you just cut the top tax rate from 74% down to 27%, and everything will trickle down. Instead, what do we get? Billionaires and poverty. They said, hey, just deregulate guns and an armed society is a polite society. Instead, we've got more school shootings than anywhere in the world. They said, just kill off civics and history classes in our schools and liberate our young people to focus on science and math. Now we've got people who don't know how our government works. I mean, it just goes on from there. There's a whole rant about it over at HartmannReport.com titled FDR Saved America, Then the GOP Ripped Us Apart. Check it out. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Vince Houghton's Nuking the Moon and Other Intelligence Schemes and Military Plots Left on the Drawing Board. This is Chapter 7, Operation Northwoods. On April 17, 1961, more than 1,400 Cuban exiles forming the Brigada de Asalto 2506 landed on the beaches of Cuba at Playa Girón in the Bahia de Cojinos, the Bay of Pigs. Their mission was to overthrow the regime of Fidel Castro, Cuba's increasingly communist leader, who had himself overthrown the regime of American ally Batista just 2 years before. A communist leader just 90 miles from Key West was a rather painful thorn in the side of the newly inaugurated President John F. Kennedy, and his ouster was considered a high national security priority, as it had been for Kennedy's predecessor, Dwight Eisenhower. The invasion was backed by the U.S. government and the CIA. We can argue why the Bay of Pigs invasion failed until we're blue in the face, and many people still do. For many in the Cuban exile community, the mission failed because JFK refused to give American naval and air support, elements called in for the original plan developed by the Eisenhower administration. Maybe this is true. The problem here is that we begin to descend into the realm of the counterfactuals, the if-onlys and what-ifs. Things that we are doing our damnedest to avoid. Look, I've met a lot of the Cubans who took part in that invasion, many of whom are permanently settled in or around Miami, my hometown. They are impressive men, and I wouldn't put anything past them. If they say they could have kicked out Castro with U.S. naval and air support, who am I to argue? But I still will, because things are much more complicated from an intelligence perspective. Despite the lack of air and naval support, and despite the intensity and desire of the Cuban exile forces, it would have been immeasurably difficult to overcome one of the most problematic aspects of the entire invasion. Castro not only knew they were coming, he knew when and where they were coming. A combination of piss-poor information security, or in today's parlance, InfoSec, with the ability of Cuban intelligence to infiltrate the Miami exile community, meant that the secret mission to free Cuba of Castro was anything but secret. It's not like this was a huge surprise for the CIA or the U.S. military. The Cuban intelligence service was very good, and some in the exile community had loose lips. In this environment, it was nearly impossible to conduct effective counterintelligence and keep the invasion secret. Most telling of all, the Soviets had literally broadcast their knowledge of the mission 4 days before it happened. On April 13th, Radio Moscow released an English-language newscast in which they predicted an invasion of Cuba by CIA-trained exiles within the week. It seems they were trying to warn us against carrying out the invasion, a type of deterrence through propaganda. Hey, we know you're coming, so perhaps now is not a good time for your secret operation. Clearly, that didn't work. The blowback from the failed mission was significant on multiple levels. More than 100 members of the 2506 Brigade were killed in combat, along with 4 American volunteer pilots from the Alabama Air National Guard, who were contracted by the CIA. Hundreds more in Cuba would be executed in the days and weeks following the invasion, as Castro eliminated anyone suspected of abetting the exiles. More than 1,200 of the brigade would be captured by the Cuban government, and some of those members were subsequently executed. The Kennedy administration was embarrassed by the failed mission. U.S. government looked inept in failing to maintain order even in its own backyard. In the zero-sum game of the Cold War, where victory for one of the superpowers was defeat for the other, this was a huge win for the Soviets. Not to mention that the invasion pushed Castro even more firmly into the Soviet sphere of influence. And as far as the strength of the regime was concerned, the Bay of Pigs invasion did the exact opposite of what was intended. It made Castro's regime more powerful than ever before. The operation was a great political victory for the Cubans at home and abroad. Castro was a hero in the eyes of his people for defeating the Yankee invasion and was able to consolidate his power. The fiasco also elevated the Cuban government to a newfound global status, transforming communist Cuba from a grieved little country to an equal in the eyes of the world. In fact, Argentinian physician turned Cuban revolutionary Ernesto Che Guevara actually thanked the United States for the failed invasion. The CIA bore the brunt of the blame for the failed mission. President Kennedy fired CIA Director Allen Dulles, along with Deputy Director Charles Cabell and Deputy Director for Plans Richard M. Bissell, the three men who made up the core of the agency's leadership, particularly in the realm of covert action. Kennedy also removed, at least temporarily, major paramilitary operations from the purview of the CIA. For more than a decade, CIA had been the agency with primary responsibility for paramilitary covert operations, but now it was benched. Into the void leapt the U.S. military. In June 1961, about 2 months after the Bay of Pigs, President Kennedy approved National Security Action Memoranda 55, 56, and 57, which codified the shift in paramilitary responsibility from the CIA to the Pentagon. Nothing else really changed. The U.S. government was still looking for ways to oust Castro from power, just through a different government agency. By autumn, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, a legendary intelligence officer, or infamous, or both, depending on your perspective, was asked to brainstorm ideas to get rid of Fidel. He didn't disappoint. In February 1962, Lansdale provided a document titled Possible Actions to Provoke, Harass, or Disrupt Cuba. Some of the actions are pretty good, some are quite silly, and some are downright abhorrent. The book is nuking. .35 minutes past the hour, and apologies for the crash of our computerized automation system. It's just every now and then things go nuts, you know. So, what's on your mind? Warren in Bothell, Washington. Hey, Warren, what's up?
Hey, good topics today.
Thank you.
They're related to the hip. In red states, we have some legislators who probably don't have medical degrees making medical decisions, particularly about abortion and women's health care. By the same token, we've got the AMA, whose Hippocratic oath, I would think, would override these poor decisions by legislators without medical licenses. Tom, talk me down.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, you've got non-physicians all over the country, Republicans, you know, trying to insert themselves between doctors and their patients with regard to abortion and other things as well. And, trans care, for example, is another one. And what's astonishing to me, Warren, is for most of my lifetime, and I've been on this planet for a good long time, for most of my lifetime, the Republican Party has been going, oh, big government, oh my God, nanny state, we can't have the big government, we can't have the government inserting itself into your life, quack, quack, quack. And now the Republican Party is all about inserting itself into our lives, about putting itself between us and our doctors, and I don't understand why Democrats are not using the same language that Republicans used for years, for decades, for a century, to attack Democrats. Or nearly
I agree with that. One of the things that is got me all spun up is I'm surprised that we're not seeing class action suits in those red states against these legislators who are practicing medicine without a license.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure class action lawsuits could work because legislators have immunity, but it should be being done through publicity. I mean, the big government nanny state memes began in the 1930s with the Republicans trying to, complain that the New Deal was socialism and FDR was a tyrant and he was trying to stick the government between you and your money, between you and your bank, between you and your retirement, quack, quack, quack. And I just don't understand why Democrats aren't using those phrases. Maybe it's that, they're anathema to Democrats because they were used against them for so long. But the reality is, Republicans love big government as long as it's used to oppress average working people and women, and used to elevate the wealth and status of billionaires and other Republicans. Warren, thank you. Well said. Patricia in Abbott Springs, Louisiana, is that right? Or Abita Springs?
Abita Springs.
Abita
That's a little
Springs.
bit north of New Orleans,
Cool.
Louisiana.
So what's
Hi.
up?
Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I really want to talk about health, especially what the last gentleman said. I actually am a nurse practitioner. I'm retired now. I'm 75, and I've been a nurse since 1970. And at one point in my career, a few years ago, I worked at Jefferson Parish, which is in New Orleans, at the school-based health systems, where we had doctor's office, and I, being a nurse practitioner, could see the kids, middle and high school, and so many young women would come in for pregnancy testing, STDs, and of course, because of HIPAA, we couldn't call the parents, so we sent them to Planned Parenthood. So that's not there anymore. Louisiana now, abortion is illegal, and the pill you take for an abortion is considered a controlled substance locked up. So for the past 9 years, I have been calling the congressmen in Louisiana are awful. And so I've been writing them, the last Trump election and all that. But I tried to get a meeting with Bill Cassidy. He's an MD. And a few months ago, I got on his website and requested an appointment to see him. And they gave me some dates, picked one, blah, blah, blah. And then a week later, he refuses to see me. Okay? So it really pisses me off because I'm his constituent. So I've been calling. I called Washington and talked to the interns for all three, except I couldn't get Kennedy yet. And I was really nice to the interns. And I said, you sound like you're a young man, and I wonder if you have a girlfriend or a wife, or are you going to have children? And are you familiar with Project 2025? Do you want your daughters and the women in your life to have no rights? And they were just listening to me. Okay. And I told the same thing to a female with the other guy. And yesterday I went to my doctor just for a checkup, and the practitioner and the doctor have been here for years, and they are so aggravated with health care, disgusted. The nurse practitioner, she's 44, she said, I can only do this 5 more years, I'm so burnt out. And the doctor who's been around my area for years, she's going to stock polio vaccine and other things that the government is trying to prevent health care from happening. And she says, I'm going to treat everybody. I don't care what they say. I'm treating my patients. So I just wanted to share that because my maybe everybody should call the senators interns and talk to them, these young people who are there who don't know what they're getting themselves into, right?
Yeah.
And then I heard on the radio, I read in the paper this morning that they want to stop FDIC, the regulation for bank, and I have a lot of money in CDs, so a lot of.
Get ready for bank failures too. And now we've got Sean. Which is the pharmacy chain that says they're no longer going to? Kroger's is just which has pharmacies, has just come out and said that they're no longer going to carry mifepristone, the abortion pill, in their pharmacies. I mean, this is just crazy.
It is crazy, and I have twin granddaughters. They have 3, and I have 3 daughters. And one of my daughters, before they became illegal in Louisiana, he had an unviable pregnancy, and they had to give her the mifepristone pill so she could pass. If that would happen now, she would have to carry that. Whatever it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
a dead fetus, yeah, I get it. Patricia, I need to move along, but thank you. You said it so well, and your story is compelling. I really appreciate the call. Sharon in San Marcos, California. Hey, Sharon, what's on your mind today? Sharon, listening on Sirius XM in San Marcos, California. Sharon, if you're talking, your mic is muted. Going once, going twice. Rick in Danby, New York. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Your first 2 hours with Congressman Pocan, and then your rant afterward got me all fired up. I live in the only blue district of New York State. I tried to call my new congressman-elect. I don't want to mention his name. I went online and I spent 10 minutes just trying to figure out how to contact him, and there's no contact information. And I really want to work on this thing. He's got to get to work for us.
Let me give you a phone number for him, Rick.
Thank you, Tom. Listen.
You know his name, right?
I know his name, yes. I don't want to mention it, but what is it?
Yeah, okay.
What's the number?
Number is 202-224-3121. That number is the switchboard for the House of Representatives, and it gets you to every single member of Congress. If you know their name, just say, please connect me to, Joe Blow, and boom, the phone will start to ring.
He's a Congress rep, but
yeah, I can't hear you now, Rick. You got far enough away from your phone that I can't hear you.
Tom. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Rick, and good luck, and let us know how that worked out. And thanks for listening to WHMP. It's 40. Yeah, thank you, Rick. It's 44 minutes past the hour. We're in a break, Sean, and although I'm not hearing it, and I'm not sure what's going on. Are we in a break on the commercial side? Yeah. Okay. So okay. Can you play a song or something for us? Okay. We'll be right back. Stick around. It's, as I said, 44 and a half minutes past the hour. And Sean should have some music for you here shortly. Or something. And say what? Okay. We'll be back in just a moment. We've got about there we go, about a 4-minute break here. And welcome back. Okay, picking up our nonprofit calls here. Kendall in Anza, California. Hey, Kendall, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom.
Hey.
I want to shortly wish out a happy holidays and peace of mind to you and Louise and all your crew.
Thank you.
And especially as well, Joyce the Hammer. Much thought and love to her. Mm-hmm. Also want to shout out to Morris, my man in Long Beach, Larry the Numbers guy in L.A., Paul in Woodinville, Washington, and Dave in Federal Way. You are listened to, and you are appreciated, and thank you so much.
Agreed.
My thought today is your 10 o'clock rant. The answer is very simple. You know it. I know it. We all know it. It's Bernie Sanders. He's been as constant as the Northern Star since he walked with Martin Luther King. And there's, all the young progressives, firebrands that are following him. all key off of him. So
yeah, except that
he's our
Bernie's
man.
82 or
He's
83 now, and he said this is going to be
that.
his last term in Congress. We need to be looking to
God
new
bless.
leadership, and for me, that's AOC, that's the Squad, that's Jasmine Crockett, that's Maxwell Frost. I mean, there's some incredible people under 40 in the U.S. Congress right now, and there's more coming up, and we need to be elevating these people, holding them up.
Understood, but we should pay homage to somebody who's paid his whole life and has been as clear as.
I'm Bernie's biggest fan. He was
diamonds
every Friday for 11 years. He was on this program taking calls
that.
from listeners.
Yes. Thank you so much, and happy holidays and peace of mind to everyone.
Thank you, Kendall. Back at you, and appreciate the call. Karen in Lakewood, Washington. Hey, Karen, what's on your mind today? Karen? Watching us on YouTube? We have an epidemic of people who are listening to their TV or monitor or phone, or not their phones. You got to listen to your phone when you call in. Debbie in Sylvania, Ohio. Hey, Debbie, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Susan called in about the Social Security Fairness Act, and she had that misconstrued. The Social Security Fairness Act doesn't apply to public employees who did not pay into Social Security. It only applies to public employees who had probably other jobs, like, for example, myself. And I'm a retired teacher, so my Social Security is cut by 1/3, and that did happen in the Reagan administration. So all this act would do is restore so that people would get their full Social Security payment, just like they did before Reagan.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that.
So this is for people who were not only teachers, but also had other jobs in their careers where they actually did pay into Social Security.
Well, yeah, like, for example, before I was a teacher, I worked as a store manager, and after I was a teacher, I tutored for,
That's got to be true of a lot of people.
Yeah, like, for example, my cousin, who's now gone, but he was a firefighter and he worked as an electrician. Lots of police officers do private security. It covers many people there, and she was right. There have been the police unions and the firefighters unions. Haven't heard the teachers union.
Debbie, I got to run. I'm sorry. I'm hitting a break here.
Okay. I just wanted to clear that up.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. And we'll be right back here. I've got to read an ad over on the commercial side, and we've got dead silence on the non-commercial side, Sean. I don't know if you can bring anything up for that. Yeah. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Said we've got more school shootings than anywhere in the world. They said just kill off civics and history classes in our schools and it'll liberate our young people to focus on science and math. Now we've got people who don't know how our government works. I mean, it just goes on from there. There's a whole rant about it over at hartmannreport.com titled FDR Saved And welcome America. back. Then the let's continue picking up your calls here. Let's see. George in Cripple Creek, Virginia. Hey, George, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, did you see that the Ukrainians just took out a Russian spy ring that was trying to get information on F-16 basing in
I heard
Ukrainian
that this morning on NPR, yeah.
Yeah, and yesterday they took out Lieutenant General Kirillov, who was in charge of the Russian nuke, chemical, and biological defense forces, who had been accused of using chemical weapons against the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
So they're doing a bang-up job.
So, George, you're a scholar of warfare to some extent, and I have a question for you. My understanding is that during World War II, for example, the Germans never targeted the White House, and the American forces and allies never targeted the Reichstagsgebäude or Berchtesgaden, Hitler's homes. That you didn't try to take out the leaders, you just tried to take out the soldiers. Number one, is that true? And number two, what does that have to do with yesterday, or what I heard on the BBC News last night, was that after the Ukrainians assassinated the chemical warfare general, Putin's people came out and said, okay, Zelensky just signed his death warrant. In other words, we're no longer going to respect that thing about you don't kill the leaders. What's going on with all this?
Yeah. I think the only plot against Hitler were Operation Valkyrie in July 1944, which was a German plot.
Right.
And I think Putin's lying, because I think the Russians have tried to take out Zelensky several times before this.
Okay. So this is now another empty threat.
They're just blowing smoke.
Yeah. Okay. So, but is that kind of a convention of warfare, that you don't go after the leaders?
Yeah, well, with Hitler, I think the thinking was Hitler was such a bad general, he was making so many mistakes, they were doing better to have him, stay in power and making so many mistakes on the battlefront rather than replace him with somebody who'd be more competent and be able to manage a German war effort more successfully.
I figured that convention of warfare went back to the eras of the European kings, when basically there were one or two families that populated the thrones of several dozen countries. You had a German king in England, right? You had a French king at one point.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
And so they didn't take out the leaders because they'd be killing off their own cousins, but they were fine with killing the soldiers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the normal cannon fire, right? That was fine. Like Queen Victoria, she had relatives on all the thrones in Europe, like Greece, and even one of the German emperors, Friedrich's wife, was a cousin of Queen Victoria, and Wilhelm was a cousin of Queen Victoria. Wilhelm II, the German emperor.
Kaiser, yeah, fascinating.
They had relatives on all European thrones.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And now that that's not the case, or not so much the case, I'm guessing that might be why Putin feels free to violate that. George, thank you. Thanks for the call, and it's always so nice to hear from you.
You and Louise over the holidays, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to take 2 weeks off here at the end, and
same here.
There you go. Okay, George. Thanks for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, just one quick one about the caller from before in terms of Putin. Why would you nuke a country that you want to occupy?
Well, and why would you nuke a country that's upwind from you?
Right. And Israel, everything's crammed together, Jerusalem.
Yeah.
But what I was calling about is you had a caller who was saying, why can't we prevent people from running for president who are felons? And, of course, it's in there, but they only chose the insurrection part of that, felony.
Yeah,
but
14th Amendment, Section 3.
Right, but what Putin does, and a lot of leaders are, they put their opposition party in jail. They run up charges, whatever it is, and then they can never run.
Yeah.
So
I think Trump is going to try that. I think Trump is going to try something like that. Yeah, I mean, he's talking now. The latest outrage is he wants to go after Liz Cheney. But I think that we're going to see some real serious efforts to gut any kind of political opposition, which is very troubling.
Right. But don't you think that Biden should make a speech and talk about all his accomplishments and say, I'll see you next year, we'll check you?
You know, he did on Monday. Biden gave a speech on Monday where he talked about all the jobs he'd created. He talked about the CHIPS Act. He talked about all these new factories. He talked about all this stuff. And it was the same time that Trump was giving his little press conference. And not one single network covered Biden. Everybody covered Trump. I'm telling you, we've got a sick media in this country right now. Bill, I got to run, but thank you for the call. And thanks for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. And that includes you. So get out there, get active, join your local Democratic Party, sign up with these one of these great groups out there like Indivisible or Move to Amend or et cetera. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. Sign up, participate, tag you're it. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you, and stay safe. I'll catch up with you on the other side.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.